Hello, good morning, everyone. It's my duty to inform you at 9:45 that we will begin in 5 minutes. We've just rung the bell, a little bit like a Prithvi Theatre touch to the proceedings, so that everyone can take their seats, and we will get going shortly in 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, one last call for everyone outside to just come in, and we are good to start. We do have a pretty significantly prestigious lineup of speakers, and we want to get them on time. There is actually another conference on epilepsy also, which is happening, the past couple of days. Of some of the doctors are shifting. They've been kind enough to accommodate us in their schedule. So with that note, before I begin, anyone who's celebrated Gudi Padwa, Ugadi, and Eid, happy festivities of the season to begin with. And just so that I'm secular enough, I hope I'm not missing everything. Easter is also just around the corner, so advance. And everything else. Yes, please, please do call out. We are an equal opportunity festive celebrator, apart from whatever else we do. And on that note, firstly, a sincere thanks to all of you for having taken time on a Saturday morning and come here. As I said, I'm barely the highlight of the day today, and my team has said that please don't take more than 7 minutes on a. If they are kind to me, they'll not turn off the mic at 8 like they do at the Oscars. But I wanted to begin with sort of sharing the journey that Rahul and I have had over the last 2.5 years. And truth be told, this particular moment has been 2.5 years in the making. We've been in the dark, largely under the hood working. And we felt that this was the right time for us to come and share our journey with you. I'll begin with a little anecdote. Rahul and I both come from Kerala, single-parent children. We come with 40 years of combined experience. So we have a lot of well-wishers in the industry. So when we started, they gave us genuine gems of advice, which I hold dear to this day. They said that both of you are starting a company. Please ensure that you do not build anything in health. Health to karna hi mat. The second advice, which we still hold dear to this day, is health mein karoge to mental health to mat karna. Okay, so that was the second advice. And the third advice, when we told them that actually we're slightly clear of mental health, we'll do brain health. The third advice was brain health, what? And I wish Rahul and I that day had a time machine to fast forward to 21st March 2026, Fairfield Marriott, where so many of you from clinical fields, scientific fields, cutting edge preventive medicine fields, advanced biomarker, early detection fields have now joined us. And this could not have happened with so many of our early adopters. So many of you have said that I've been following you for your first one. Dr. Prem is here. He was there before the company was formed, and today he's here again to represent Wisdom Club, and of course his specialty is actually working with geriatrician with a lens on preventive health. So that's been our journey. Before I hand over to my far more prestigious colleague with a lot more fancy credentials at what I come up with, which is Dr. Sumiti, I want to sort of just ask 3 questions to you, okay? Question number 1, how many of you recently got a full body checkup done in the last 6 months? Just a raise of hands. I'm not asking anything personal. I'm not going to go into your parameters. Okay. If I push that number to the last 12 months, 60% of you raised your hands. Probably 80% of you will raise your hands. If I say 18 months, 98% of people will raise your hands. Okay, so let's park that question. Number 2 question is, from the morning, you've come, you've interacted with people. We are a lovely bunch of like-minded souls here. We believe in certain things. That's why we have participated here. If I ask you, which particular organ of your body, from morning till evening until now, has been at work the hardest? So you have your heart, you have your liver, you have a kidney. Of course, we're a brain health conference, so you're like, Isaac, are you asking a trick question or what, right? So let me put it another way. Yes, it is the brain, right? Your brain is the one which is expending maximum amount of calories by a significant distance. Nobody Googles these days, so you can use Claude, you can use ChatGPT. I've tried both. The answer is the same. I've Googled also. But roughly 20 to 25% of every day's calories consumed is actually by your brain. Now, going back to my first question. In your last body health checkup, आपने जो भी service provider use किया होगा, and I hope you use Metropolis because they are our partners. They will be joining us shortly. You got your heart values, you got your conditions of liver, you got your conditions of, kidney, perhaps a few more inflammation markers, other, risk markers. Can you tell me which marker was pointing towards the organ that you all today just accepted and learned that, brain is the #1 organ? Does anyone remember anything that they did for their brain, given that it is the most important organ in the body? HSCRP is not bad. It's an inflammation marker. It's one of the neurocognitive panels that Metropolis recommends that you do when you take our test. Absolutely right, sir. B12 could be one as well. But there are quite a few. And science, again, will veer towards, let's say, a few standard tests that you can do, right? But the point is that when you were doing it and the gentleman came home, or whoever took your test came home, you did not bother about your brain, right? And that's what we are here to change. And that's why today the forum that we have come to you with is not about just a brain health forum. It is a brain health and early detection forum. And I'll come to the second part in a minute. You see, the only time, unfortunately, God forbid, if something happens to us, when we will check our brain? When it's too late. I know this because my father had Parkinson's. Rahul knows this because, Rahul's had people in his family who have suffered from neurodegeneration. And that's what we are here to change. So that's why this is a brain health and early detection forum. That's what we are here to change. And the last thing I want to sort of just leave you with is that the brain is a very complex organ. And today, when I tell you about the housekeeping rules, you realize some of you will drift off in between, some of you will be super alert, some of you will be, will be writing notes, trying to recall, and you will probably narrate to your family members what happened here today. You see, everything that you will do today on a day-to-day basis, as I mentioned in my first point, links to the fact that it is the most important organ of your body. And today together, if we are able to advance that conversation around brain health and, we just learn a little bit more from the best field in the society, I think this will be a half a day spent really, really well, especially on a day when India is not playing a T20 Cup final. So I think we can all be rest assured that this will be, time well spent. With that, we have a little video of our journey so far, a 1-minute clip that we'll show you. As I said, some of you know us from before, some of you are meeting us for the first time. And while that video plays, the person who will speak next is our Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Sumiti Saharan. She is a PhD in neurodegeneration. She has worked with institutes like National Brain Research Institute in Gurgaon. She is both an academic, she is a scientist, and also comes with a very rich experience of leading digital products across Abgen Health, which has multiple digital products ranging to different kind of consumers. So very rare blend of actual digital transformation, application, science, but more importantly, I think for Ivory, obviously academics love her, but all the doctors who work with her have said that this is the right scientific way to actually approach brain health, you could say screening or diagnostics in India. She often plays the role of holding Rahul and me back whenever we get too excited about ideas. She said, this is not clinically validated. Please throw this out. I don't care if you're getting excited. So a friend, philosopher, guide, and mentor to everyone in the team. Dr. Sumiti will speak to you shortly after this video. Thank you. We'll meet at lunch and talk more.
Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. How's everyone doing? It's nice to be one of the first people speaking because I know all of you are alert. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So I am going to ask a lot of you here are clinicians or from the scientific background. For those of you who are clinicians, I want to start today's conversation by asking you a question. Um, if you can tell me, when you get patients coming and you want to take care of their heart health, at what point in the journey of heart health, right from the beginning, when we are talking about modifiable risk factors, all the way to the end, when we are talking of the point of failure, where the organ has had sufficient damage to fail, right? This is a abnormal ECG, this is a heart attack, this is a stroke, it's an in this journey, which will take anywhere between 5 to 20 to 30 years, at what point do you as individuals for your heart or as clinicians for your patient's heart begin to think about prevention? And at what point do you begin to say, I want to monitor this heart, I want to monitor how it's doing and if any action is needed? So, absolutely right. Strike early, strike strong. Prevention thoughts happen, we get health awareness messages from the age of 30 in India, especially given how prevalent it is, to start making people aware of the risk factors that put your heart health at risk, whether it's diet, whether it's lifestyle, whether it is genetic predisposition. When we talk about screening, it is again at that age that you're thinking, ideally way before you start getting, any sort of symptoms like getting out of breath or anything that begins to indicate that your heart may not be functioning. This is when the assessment starts. Now I want to ask you a second question. Isaac alluded to this. When we now talk about brain health, the same spectrum, right from the beginning when your brain is working fine, but there might be risk factors, modifiable risk factors, that are putting your brain health at risk, all the way to the point of failure, which is when a family member takes their parent or their spouse to a doctor, it's a neurologist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and says, he's forgetting, or this person goes and says, I'm not able to function. Yesterday I was standing 10 minutes and I didn't know where I am. Or, it's a daughter saying, I'm experiencing mood changes. This is the point of failure for the brain. When the brain is not able to compensate, is not able to function reliably to make you who you are and let you do the things you want to do. In this journey, which has again taken anywhere between 10 to 30 years, at what point as clinicians are we talking about prevention? And at what point are we talking about screening and monitoring the brain? I will say today that we are not talking about prevention at all. We have zero discourse in our healthcare field about preventing accelerated cognitive decline. And I posit to you that this is a problem. And when we talk about screening and monitoring, the first time people get screened for their cognitive function is when they're at their doctor's office. Families have picked up symptoms, or this individual is not able to work sufficiently. And then the doctor does an MMSE, they do an ACE3, they do a psychometric evaluation, they do along with a clinical interview to try and triage if this person could have early dementia, moderate dementia. In some really proactive people, they might have landed up in a doctor's office at mild cognitive impairment, which is an early stage of cognitive impairment, a good portion of who will go on to develop dementia. Not all, but a good portion, right? That is the reality in India, and that is the reality in upper middle class urban India. The reality is a lot scarier in tier 3 India and a lot scarier in rural India where nobody will ever go to a doctor, and such cognitive decline will be thought to be just normal aging. Given how much our brain makes us us, that's scary, and that's not right. And we at Ivory exist despite everything that the investors told Isaac, because we do want to bring about a change in that. So moving ahead, right, like fundamentally, we are only measuring brain health after failure. I want us to remember this as a group today. And this is what all of us really have to start changing, like actively beginning to change. And one of the reasons this has happened is because we've also not had the tools. There's a question mark under early signs and early symptoms, because it's been really hard to measure. With heart, there are a lot of parameters to measure which have been well established, lot of clinical trials done, and that's messier with the brain. And that's even today's reality, though there have been some improvements. So if you begin to look at it, today, with cognitive markers of looking at people's cognitive function, with certain blood markers coming, like inflammation markers like high sensitivity CRP, which is more a risk marker, or plasma markers which are coming for amyloid and tau and different ratios, you have some indications, you have a pathway. None of these are confirmatory, none of these are diagnostic, but when you take these plasma markers, when you take effective cognitive screening, and you take clinicians' input, you can begin to triage. You can begin to triage probabilities and risk, and that is a lot better than the scenario I just painted. So it really now is opening up this opportunity to begin to move those arrows further, make it mimic heart health. And one thing I want us to remember is, it's really promising when you look at that heart health trajectory right now. This was not the case just 10 to 15 years ago in India. So what I'm proposing about brain health is very much possible, very much doable within the Indian healthcare ecosystem. Just 10 to 15 years ago, nobody knew physical inactivity and heart health are linked. A layperson did not know that connection. We in India have made that possible today. That awareness exists, heart monitoring exists, all of us are raising our hands. Our parents were not doing this screening for heart health. We can change that trajectory for brain health, and that makes me really excited. And if we have to do that, right, the only way we are going to do it is if we build better systems for measuring cognitive health, right? When you have easy, effective, reliable tools, measurement becomes protocol, it becomes easy. So looking at it thus far, as I said, we've looked at cognitive health in two ways, brain health loosely. One is performance, where you're looking more on cognitive health, so paper and pen psychometric assessments. At the same time, otherwise there has been MRI, PET, which have been prohibitive in cost and effort, so are only used when really, really needed to confirm a case. But our present today is really changing, and the way it's changing is, one, in terms of cognitive performance, we have digital assessments that are coming up, which are a lot more sensitive, a lot more subtle, and are able to pick up, instead of failure, they are able to pick up early changes, cognitive drift, which is a huge difference. Failure is when the brain is not able to compensate and that person cannot function the way they were. Early changes is when they're happening in some of us right now, for sure. We are able to function, we are able to do our day-to-day tasks, but our cognition is beginning to drift in a way that indicates clinical pathology. That is that early period, that opportunity to intervene, to slow, to stall, to reverse decline. As well as there are plasma biomarkers coming, and people will talk to you in depth about these. I'm not here to go in depth, right? I also want us to look to the future. This is what I want to give in the next 5 minutes. So if you go ahead, I think in the future, what will this cognitive tracking look like? Like, let's imagine that for a second. And of course, on the blood work or physiological side, I'm sure there are other markers that are coming that are going to be more confirmatory, more proteins that will be discovered that are going to be more reliable as diagnostic markers, right? So this is the world we are moving towards. So going back to the present, when I speak about digital assessments, I want to give you a flavor of why they are better than your paper and pen psychometric tasks. So this is one of the digital assessments that we at Ivory provide to the clinicians. It is an 18-minute task, right, which is digital. As a clinician, anybody can do it on their mobile phone. Clinician doesn't need to administer it. It's self-administered. There are 3 tasks that the person is doing. The tasks don't have any words. The tasks don't have any objects that have a culture association. It's random shapes that you're seeing. At the end of these 3 tasks, you get a profile of somebody's cognition, their memory, their executive function, their processing speed, and their attention. So you get a profile on how they are functioning, and this score that you get is normed to their age, to their gender, and to their education levels. Is it diagnostic? Not by a far throw, right? Is it indicative? Is it a tool in a clinician's hand to start doing that triaging a lot more effectively? Absolutely. Because it is digital, because it's measuring things in milliseconds, because it is capturing a lot of parameters, it is a lot more responsive to clinically meaningful, subtle changes. That is what we want to really capture, rather than failure, which is too late. So when you look at tasks like this table, the only thing I want to tell you is these tasks are not perfect. But where they are better is, rather than just giving you one cutoff score, they are giving you domain-wise indications of performance, which allow you to take a much better assessment on what might be going wrong in a patient. What is the domain network in the brain that might be at risk? The second thing is they are a lot more sensitive. Because of their digital nature and the variables they're capturing, they are more sensitive to picking up subtle deficits. They are flawed in that what is normal or abnormal, if I do the test, it is being compared to people my age, my gender, and of my education levels. And there's going to be variance in there. And that is where there is an error margin in all of these tasks. It is there in psychometric tasks, it is there in the digital tasks, but this is the best we have in the world at the moment, that we as individuals and as clinicians can use for our patients. Moving further, I want us to think about the future, right? So if we go ahead, when you talk about future, I mentioned something like cognitive profiling. 2 concepts I want us to think of. One, every brain has a cognitive signature. What I mean by it is I have a unique combination of what is my learning ability, what is my processing speed, how does my attention vary, and that's different than yours, and that's different than yours, ma'am, right? It's almost like a fingerprint, except that it varies with experience, with circumstances, but it is unique to us, right? Which is why the who is intelligent varies so much. Like, what is intelligence? There are so many different types of intelligences, and that depend on our cognitive skills. The reason this is important is why population norms are messy, because there's no one right level of attention or executive function or memory. When I talk about clinical deficit, it is relative to me. How was my memory at a certain stage in my 20s, and how is it now in my 40s, and how is it changing, right? It is relative to me that clinical deficits start having a meaning, especially in the early stages. The second thought I want you to play around with is I posit to you that everything I'm doing right now, I'm looking at you, I'm smiling, I'm moving my hands, I'm speaking about an idea without like memorizing a script, but because I know of it, so I'm forming words. You are listening. Each of these, I'm standing straight. All of this is a behavior, and it is being coordinated in a large part by my brain. So every behavior, my speech, my eye, my gait, my hand motion, is actually a marker into how my brain is functioning. We know this in extreme cases, right? Like your gait is very unstable, it becomes an indication of Parkinson. But it is also true at very, very minute levels. So the question is, can we not use these external behaviors, especially when they're captured through digital tools like the smartphone, which is changing our world, whether we like it or not, to get a glimpse into the brain? Two thoughts: unique cognition for each of us. So our cognitive changes need to be personalized. Thought number two, our behaviors, a lot of our interactions with the world are actual indicators into our brain function. So let's move ahead. I think where the world sits, and this is something that at Ivory Cognition Labs we have been working a lot on, is that if you keep these two concepts together, my individual cognitive signature along with the digital biomarkers, you contextualize it to the function, the lifestyle, the environmental factors that our wearables are giving us, stress, sleep, all of that, you can get immense insight. You open up a crazy world. You can now begin to predict somebody's aging trajectory. You can predict when their clinical deviations are happening, which are not random fluctuations, but are clinical deviations, because you know their baseline, not a population baseline, but their baseline. And you can even start thinking about optimizing their cognition, right, in a particular domain. So you have now an individualized journey, quite a bit like personalized medicine for cancer, into taking care of someone's cognition, ensuring it remains at the level that they want for an independent, happy, and productive life late into their 60s, 70s, 80s. So, and this is the going back to that table, I want you to focus on individual tracking. I think that's the most important thing. When you look at a cognitive monitoring, which is monitoring you over time in some very easy, non-invasive way, you get your baseline, which is being tracked for trends, looking at what is your normal fluctuation, and being able to look at trends over time to tell you when something might be a clinical indication. So I think there is immense opportunity there, and I think that is where cognition is going, because this is going to become a lot more reliable and a lot more meaningful at an individual level. And I want everyone today to get a flavor of what this might look like. This is a small piece that we have been working at Ivory Cognition Labs. I'm showing you a small glimpse and a beta version. But if you can play the video, Shudipta, this is what this interaction might look like, right? My God, I look very excited, so let's see. All right, then, I'm ready to test my cognition. Are we ready? Audio, please. Very good, Preet?
Yes.
Let's go. I've had a decent day. It has had a lot of travel today for the Cogniverse conference. So left from Pune post breakfast. Thankfully did not get too much jam, which was nice. Once I came here, it was really nice to just meet everyone from Ivory. last-minute hustle happening. We've been trying to get everything in place, make sure the mics work tomorrow and things don't fall apart, which is fine. That's it, I think, all I can remember about the day. Woohoo! Peak capacity today. What you saw was a small thing that you might do everything. A cognitive game that's assessing your memory, your attention, along with me speaking, and it is analyzing my voice signatures to look at both my emotional state as well as my cognitive attention and resonance, along with eye tracking, which is also measuring factors of attention, of focus. And it is giving me that 92.5%, which made me very thrilled. And I've had days when I've gotten 40% on this beta version. The idea is this is creating over time a baseline that is for me, Sumiti. And when these fluctuations happen, when a big trend change happens, now you have a lot of digital signatures which are being captured from my voice to my eye tracking abilities. We can add other components like hand stability with a smartphone. Like the world is endless, guys. And this is, I think, really going to be where the future is going to go. So I'm quite excited around this. Last question, why does this matter? I think Isaac spoke about it, how important the brain is to us, how much of our brain it makes us who we are, right? If our brain circuitry changes, our personality changes, our moods change, our way of processing the world changes. So it is about preserving us, it is about optimizing us as people, really, when you're talking about brain preservation or brain optimization. And if you can't remember anything else, remember this, right? One of the key reasons is that if you look at every organ in your body, the one organ that is the biggest predictor of your lifespan and of your health span is the biological age of your brain. So if you are worrying about your liver, yes, your heart health, yes, because these things are also affecting your brain. But in this world, when we are beginning to focus on longevity and of living well, of healthy aging, we cannot do that without considering our brain. Thank you for your time. It was lovely talking to all of you, and I hope you enjoyed. To follow this on, I'm not leaving the stage yet. The one thing I would like to do is I would like to introduce and invite Dr. Sanjay Arora for a chat with me. Dr. Sanjay Arora is one of those people who has touched every aspect of the healthcare ecosystem and has made meaningful impact in that space. He's a leader, he's a healthcare entrepreneur, he's a healthcare investor. He's had 30 years of experience and has had a chance to work with hospitals like JJ Hospital, Johns Hopkins, Henry Ford, you name it, he's been there. He is the founder of Suburban Diagnostics. He runs the Wisdom Club, which focuses on healthy aging. And he has been named the influential leader of New India 2021 by Team Marksman. So really, like, he's a trailblazer. He's an inspiration to me in the man he has been. And when he has time being from his healthcare ventures, he's a chef, he's a golfer, I believe he's a DJ in the making, and he is a visual photographer. So I invite Dr. Sanjay Arora. Hello. So,
It's great to see a full room. Isaac, Well done.
I'm sure the audience wants me to ask you about your DJ journey, but we are going to stick to healthcare today. Um, Dr. Sanjay, uh, I want today's conversation to just like garner on the 30 years of experience you've had in the medical field, plus the experience that you have had running Wisdom Club, which is really focusing on healthy aging. And the first question I want to speak to is around the theme. Like when we talk about brain health, cognitive health, we know the heart health risk trajectories, etc. But talking about brain health, at what point do we really need to start looking at risk? What is that stage in a person's life when it becomes clinically meaningful to you as a doctor?
So let me, give that with a story. I'm a storyteller really, actually, in that sense. So my grandmother lived to age of 101. I don't know if that's good or bad sometimes, that's a topic for another day, that what is the right age to die? And we'll talk about that. We say that Ayushman Bhava, live long, and you spoke about lifespan and health span. I think that's really where we are today. Do we want to just live long, or do we want to live well? I think that's the important part. And my grandmom, towards the last 5-6 years of her life, definitely had dementia. But this I'm talking about close to 25 years ago. And I'm just trying to put it into context of our realization in our country, and my cousin who came from Canada to see our grandmom. And while everybody in India felt, Dadi to thoda satak gayi hai, she's gone mad, whatever, he had seen her as a child, and he saw her after a few years, and he said, Sanjay Bhaiya, nahi, this is not her, this is a disease that she has. She has a problem. And I think that was the first realization, that how we are looking at mental health, and how perhaps the West has already seen it maybe 20 years before us, and how we have to maybe play catch up to that.
Yeah.
So I think we are still not there. And I'll put it in my personal context. When we started Suburban Diagnostics, the objective was very simple. Do a test not to fall ill, not do a test when you fall ill. I think that's exactly where we are today with mental health or cognition. We are doing it almost retrospectively, looking into the rear view mirror, rather than looking through the windshield and saying, okay, what can we do better to navigate our journey through life? I think that's where the opportunity is. I do a health checkup around my birthday every year. I'm turning 60 in 3 days' time, and I still haven't done the health checkup. But I did do the assessment from Ivory last week. I didn't do very well on that, so I have to redo it now. I think I did it on my laptop. I have to do it on the phone. But at least I know there is a baseline for me now. I try and solve crossword puzzles every day. I don't think that's enough. Many people do that. So I think knowing your baseline brain function, so to say, and if I was to do it all over again, I would make sure that your health checkup includes the brain, which I think we'll do now from now on.
60 onwards is not a bad journey to start. And I like what you said, right? Do tests, do checkups, not to fall ill. Like, I think it's a great message to have. And when we keep that framing, we now know there are a lot of modifiable risk factors that can explain up to 45 to 50% of all dementias that happen. And this is not only about dementia, this is also about cognitive slowing down to the level where you can stop being productive or connected to the community, stop having meaning in your life at some level. Even if it's not dementia, you don't want that, right? So when we talk about, and I'm going to loosely call it accelerated cognitive decline, of all the risk factors we know, whether it's of cardiovascular health, to social loneliness, to hearing loss, to diabetes and hypertension, which are maybe the 3 to 4 that you think are really relevant from an India context?
So I think when I read that article from the Lancet, and it may be a good idea to share that with the audience, the link of that article. Really good article, identifies 14 modifiable risk factors, and maybe for people in the audience who are not from the clinical background, there are certain risk factors which you just cannot change, like aging. You cannot change that. You cannot change your genetics that you're born with. But there are certain things which are in your control. So I call it control the controllables. What you can control, control. What you can't, I guess, you just try and improve on that. The good thing that when I read that article and I realized is that many of those risk factors apply to not just mental health, but health in general. I think probably the most important one is your blood pressure. I think everybody in the room would know their blood pressure. How many of you are on medication for blood pressure? For high blood pressure, let me put it that way. Some of you, okay, fine, great. I think just keeping your blood pressure under check, keeping your higher number below 130 is, I think, a great start. So if we can ensure that our blood pressure remains in check, great idea. My grandmom went to a doctor, a good friend of mine, and came back and said, "Ye doctor acha nahi hai, isne mera blood pressure check nahi kiya." So she could still relate to that.
Yeah.
Second, I think India is, diabetes is a big problem in India. And I think both blood pressure, high blood pressure and diabetes are linked to blood flow, your blood supply to your other parts of the body, but including your brain. So if you're able to address high blood pressure, if you're able to address diabetes, if you're able to address inactivity. I was reading an article that even few thousand steps a day can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
But there are some, smaller things which don't get addressed, especially in India. Now, many of us in the room are wearing eyeglasses because visual acuity or lack of clarity in vision is very easily perceptible. It's seen, obviously. But hearing loss is something that is not perceived as much. And I would want to encourage more and more people to get a simple audiometry check once a year. It's available. We have an ENT doctor at the back. Please get a hearing test done. Simple hearing aid can make such a big difference. If people cannot hear, they automatically go into a withdrawal. Communication becomes a problem. And when we set up, Dr. Prem and I set up the Wisdom Club together, one of our biggest opportunities was to address loneliness, social isolation. And I think hearing loss aggravates that to some extent. And our objective at the Wisdom Club was to address social isolation or loneliness, which can lead to depression, which can lead to other things. So I think high blood pressure, diabetes, physical activity, I'll put it in a positive way, 1,000, 2,000 steps every day, keeping your weight in check, eating well. These are all general things all of us anyways do. I think a big thing is, how long does it take for you to recharge your phone? Some can do it in 2 hours, some can do it overnight. How do we recharge our brain? Anybody who's not from the clinical background, how do you recharge your brain? Sleep. Perfect. Perfect.
From my neighborhood plot.
Cannot emphasize enough.
The chirping of the birds wake me up.
Perfect,
I don't need
perfect.
an alarm to wake up.
Perfect. I wish all of us could do that like you do.
Thank you.
Idea is to keep your phone away. Sleep 7 to 8 hours. I think that's a huge opportunity for all of us to do. I met somebody last evening and they said they sleep not before 3 a.m.
Yeah.
But then he says, then I wake up at 11 a.m. Of course, that's fine. So I think small, easy things, and as you said, 45 to 50% of cognitive decline is literally in our hands.
Absolutely. And reiterating a statistic largely comes from hearing loss that you spoke about. You're very right that it's one of the most underlooked thing. Even a 20 to 30% of hearing loss, which will allow us to be functional, is increasing your risk of cognitive decline by up to almost, I would say, 50% as per some studies. So it's a huge influencer because it socially isolates you. And some of these things we just need to focus more as clinicians to make people aware of. And linking to that, coming to reality, of course, these risk factors matter. Of course, we need to work on it. And of course, we need to be testing for cognition. But realistically, you're looking at a GP's office, you're looking at a 10-minute appointment going through, sometimes shorter. The person has come for a back pain. The person has come because they have a cold. Realistically, where is cognition or cognitive health checks or awareness fitting it in this real world scenario, right? And think about a GP and maybe think about a psychiatrist where people are landing up. What are those action steps that they can do?
So I've had a brilliant opportunity of working with clinicians across the ecosystem. I still strongly believe in the value of a family physician, because he or she knows the family the best, knows the family over a long period of time, as you said, being able to track, knows behavioral changes over a period of time. I still believe that the test that Ivory is able to offer, which is a simple screening test, which takes 2 to 3 minutes, if that is available with every family physician, and the family physician is able to get their patient base to do that once a year. I think as part of the annual health checkup, if you were to include that at the family physician level, because the family physician perhaps is the first point of contact to be able to perceive any change. But as you very correctly said, when you perceive the change, you're probably, so the opportunity is, do you want to catch it on the upslope or do you want to catch it on the downslope? I think more often than not, we are catching at least brain health on the downslope. And the opportunity here is to catch it on the upslope. How do we catch it on the upslope is perhaps including this 2 to 3 minute screening test, enabling every family physician to be able to do this. I think they'll be the center point of then being able to say, okay, fine, go to a neurologist, go to a psychiatrist, or go whatever, do whatever. But I think empowering the family physician with this, I believe, is a game changer.
Absolutely, and I think the benefit of that is, as you said, they have the clinical history of the patient, so they know the behavioral signs, they know just context about them as an individual, and this becomes an additional tool for them to assess if there is anything to worry about. You run the Wisdom Club, Dr. Sanjeev. So how commonly do you see any kind of cognitive decline that worries you? How common is it?
So Dr. Prem and I, we have a weekly meeting every Monday, and Dr. Prem presents a dashboard of our residents. We don't call them patients. And the idea is to make sure we call less and less people patients, picking it early. When we started the Wisdom Club, our objective was to help people who could not be managed at home. Largely people who had short-term stay. Could come for maybe a few weeks to a few months. But today, 80% of the residents that we have some form of cognitive decline. And that is eye-opening, it is shocking, it is disturbing. And I call it this, Sumiti, honestly, an epidemic. because we don't know what's under the surface. When we started the Wisdom Club, Dr. Prem and I spoke about dementia, cognitive decline, and he's building a protocol only on managing care for cognitive decline and dementia. Now, his approach has accelerated. Our new center that is coming up in Nerul is 3 times the size of what we have in Villeparle. I think a large part of that is going to focus on cognitive decline because that's what we are seeing. 80% of our residents in Villeparle have some form of cognitive decline. That's the reality. And
Scary.
we are finding it that a husband is calling and saying, and this is a person I know personally, Sanjay, I am 88 years old. I cannot take care of my wife who is 85 because I myself am fatigued. I don't know what to do. Please help me. Now, this is people I have seen, from my childhood. And it's heartbreaking that a husband is saying, please help me take care of my wife. I cannot manage her at home. Fortunately, Dr. Prem and his team doing a phenomenal job, in helping such people as well.
It's a scary statistic, no? Like, I think one of the issues is, as a young country, like dementia happens to someone. It's such a far away thing to us. And when you start talking of cognitive decline and that number, it really puts it in context in terms of how meaningful it is. Like, if you have great joints and you have a great liver, but you have lost your cognition, even if it's slowed down to 30%, your quality of life is severely impacted. And the quality of life of your family members, I'm not even going to start on. Right?
No, so I think what everybody in this room believes is to remain independent, not to become dependent. My mom used to tell me, beta, agar meko kuch ho gaya, and if I have to be dependent on you, let me go. Nobody wants to be dependent. Give you a scenario last night. My father is 91. 3 years ago, he has a vision problem, so he fell in the bathroom. And I told him that I think you cannot be without a helper at home, a caregiver at home. He said, nahi, meko nahi chahiye. I don't want it. I can manage on my own. But I finally got him a caregiver because he fell down and I think the family just took a turn. Last night, the caregiver's mother unfortunately passed away. So caregiver is now on leave for the next 6 days. So all of us are wondering, how do we help? So I told Dad that I'm going to sleep in your room, or we'll get somebody else to sleep in your room, or the morning caregiver is willing to stay 24 hours. 10 बजे के बाद मेरे रूम में कोई नहीं आएगा. 6 बजे के पहले मेरे रूम में कोई नहीं आएगा. I can manage on my own. At this age also he wants to remain independent. So I think the objective is, there's something called as activities of daily living, or what we call ADLs. As long as people can keep activities of daily living in their own control, life is fine. The moment activities of daily living get compromised, that's when challenges happen. So I think our approach has to be this, is to make sure, how do we screen people at a stage where activities of daily living have not been compromised, and how do we make sure we prevent it from reaching that stage where activities of daily living get compromised. But we've also seen this. We have people at the Wisdom Club who have severely compromised activities of daily living. But because of our intervention, and I'm not just trying to, pat myself on the back, I think Dr. Prem and the team deserve all the credit. Daily activities, physiotherapy, social interaction, indulging them on the kind of food they want to eat, companionship. We had one lady, she's a retired RBI senior official who had severe cognitive decline. Please chat with Dr. Prem. He won't give the name, but talk to him about this case when she came and how she is today. Actually seeing, I'll not say reversal, but improvement. You talk to her in her language, she smiles at you. Um, she's part of the activity. She's sitting on a wheelchair, but is actively participating in the activities. She's now responding. Her husband comes, she acknowledges his presence. So from where she came few months ago to where she is today. So the point I'm trying to make is the brain is neuroelastic. There is an opportunity for the brain also to recover. The liver we know can recover well. There are certain organs in our body. We always thought that brain once damaged is irreversible. Not the case. Of course, we don't want to reach that stage where it is actually irreversible. Pick it up early. Let it not go to a stage where activities of daily living get compromised. But pick it up on the upslope, not on the downslope. Get a screening test done. I mean, we want to make sure the difference between your lifespan and your health span is as little as possible. Today, where people are living till their late 80s and 90s, but their health plateaus maybe in mid 70s. So there's a 10 to 15 year gap between your lifespan and your health span. And as you very correctly said, brain health deteriorates the maximum in that gap. And that is when people become dependent. They lose their sense of self. They lose their sense of society. 50% of those cases, I feel, can be prevented.
Absolutely, and I think capturing it on the upslope, if I extend what you do at Wisdom Club, which is just give people a rich environment, healthy food, healthy social interactions, meaningful social interactions, cognitive activities, games. It's a micro environment on what is optimal for us as people and our brain. And that is what you want to be doing through your life in some way, right? Give richness of experience, give rich diet, give physical activity to ourselves, and a lot of our body takes care of itself. Maybe I want you to, so in this space, if you had to bust one myth that you think most of us are going to have, what would be that myth?
So one is, I'll say it in a different way. Don't take your brain for granted. Let me put it that way. People believe that, sorry, you were saying something?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we tend to take our brain for granted. And as a result, we feel that, picking it up where my grandmother was, that's the way to detect. No, I think that's too late. So the myth is that, okay, once you start forgetting names, I met somebody in the audience some time back, and I met her in a conference maybe a month ago, but she's right there at the back. She had to remind me that we met at the conference, and I'm just asking myself, and I told her this, I think maybe I'm at the right place. So, she was very kind to me and said, no, you're meeting so many people and you're out of context or whatever. And suddenly I came up and I got you. But yeah, it's a myth that, when you start forgetting things or you miss recognizing people, that's the earliest sign. I think that's a myth. The reality is these changes happen much earlier. And while I think you want to assess cognitive decline in your 50s, starting, I would say do it in your 40s. And I say the reason is this, is the damn phone. It's the damn phone. Doom scrolling. We just lose ourselves on our phone, scrolling. Scrolling is the new smoking. Scrolling is the new sitting. Scrolling is, your decline. So, and kids, people are on their phones from the age of 10. I think it's really, I think we're looking at it too late, start earlier. That would end with that.
Fantastic. I'll open it maybe if the audience has one question. I know the gentleman right at the back was raising his hand from earlier, and we can take one question.
Yeah, so I'm the ENT surgeon Dr. Arora mentioned about. Now, so as you rightly said, we must start screening for deafness also. It becomes more important in today's age where we see a new trend of deafness emerging, which is called entertainment deafness. And I'm wearing that, what I call the male Mangal Sutra, you know, the wireless headphones, just for demonstration. You will see almost half the population on this, or the earbuds, AirPods, for the Apple generation. So they are hearing at almost maximum volume, almost the whole day. And we are seeing deafness at the age of 20-25. We are not only seeing heart attacks, but we are also seeing deafness, and we label it as entertainment deafness, because what else do you name it? And regarding the early morning getting up that you said, there's a very popular book by Robin Sharma, The 5 a.m. Club, and it has been written for a reason. And there are physiological reasons why we should be getting up early in the morning. And as my colleague said, it's best to get up in the morning and the first thing you hear is the chirping of the birds. Because of our smartphones and mobile towers, sparrows have become sparse. And yesterday was World Sparrow Day. So also, the mind does not see what the eyes do not know. The same applies to the ear also. And hearing is of two types. In Hindi, they say, do kano se. That means one incoming, one outgoing, as you do for your spouse or for your mother-in-law. And the other is with 2 ears, with both ears, which means whatever you hear remains between the 2 ears. And that in-between area is the most important. And as doctors, we don't need to heal the organ. We also need to heal the body that harbors the organ and the mind that controls the body. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for another question? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, let's just wait for the mic to get to you, sir, so everyone can participate.
Thank you. So you mentioned about longevity. Okay, now more than longevity, I mean 70, 80, 90 सब लोग जी रहे हैं, but it's more about vitality, and like you correctly pointed out, quality of life, and fitness, being healthy, and true well-being. There are actually 3 different things. We need to narrow the gap between fitness, health, and true well-being. True well-being is, of course, combination of fitness and health. Second thing, for blood pressure, 130, 80, yeah, everyone knows, but for women, it's a little lower, 110. So a lot of high blood pressure in women gets missed between 110 and 130. Thirdly, hearing loss. Hearing loss is a microvascular complication of T2DM, type 2 diabetes. It's well documented. Fourthly, social isolation, like Sir said, that is more damaging than smoking more than 15 cigarettes per day. Fifthly, sleep hygiene. Fragmented or fractured sleep, I mean, no one can repair that. It's very difficult. And lastly, as we all know, GLP-1, semaglutide, has gone off patent today or yesterday, jo bhi hai. And I call GLP-1s as game-changing, life-changing proteins. And they have a major role to play in reducing neuroinflammation, central insulin resistance, improving cerebral blood flow, you name it, brain-derived neurotropic factor, hippocampal neurogenesis. So, I mean, it comes back to all your, people talk GLP-1, obesity, diabetes, hypertension, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. But I think they are more important for improving cognitive decline and reducing cancers. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sanjay, thank you so much for your time and your insights. I'll ask you to give a one-line takeaway to all clinicians that you want them to start doing from tomorrow in the room, and then we'll close it.
Yeah, I'm just repeating myself that don't take your brain for granted. Don't take the brain of your patients for granted. Do an annual health checkup. Make sure brain health is part of that annual health checkup. Can't stress enough about it. I think the gentleman here summarized things really well, so thank you for doing that. Simple things that need to be done as individuals, what's in our hand, but as clinicians, what can be ingrained as part of maintaining, a healthy life. Brain health, integral part of that.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay. I just want to mention one anecdote. Last night, we were sort of calling everyone who was, coming here just to make sure that the attendance. Dr. Sanjay called me at 9:30. Isaac, everything going okay? Is the team okay? Are they doing okay? So that's the force of nature that we have behind. He didn't leave it, and just assume that things are okay. So really grateful to have you as a part of our journey, sir. Just one small housekeeping announcement. Because we have a stellar lineup of clinicians, we are not doing a tea coffee break. However, tea coffee is open throughout. So please feel free to go anytime, come back. Try and not miss too much because the tea and coffee is like so-so, but the discussion is a lot better. I just need one chair if someone can help me with it. We'll go to a session called Mental Health in the Age of AI. And the perspectives we will bring together are both from a neurological lens as well as a psychiatric lens. So I'm very honored to call on stage two doctors who've been very close to the Ivory journey. I will introduce Dr. Prakhar first. He is the head of department at psychiatry at Terne Medical College. I often meet him either in his clinic or, I wait for him until his patient flow is done at Bombay Hospital, which is, I think, something that you might find a little more accessible and around. He is one of those clinicians who I've realized is still keeping a mix of academics, deep research through his work, as well as, of course, a thriving, clinical practice. So you'll get to hear from you shortly. It's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Prakhar Jain. And my next guest is Dr. Siddharth Warrior. Again, one of those who has been with us from the very, very initial days. He was the consultant neural, or rather is still, of course, he goes there at Namaha Hospital in Kandivali. Some of you might know him also as somebody who really breaks down complex neurology/neuroscience topics and makes it extremely relatable. He's an educator. And one of the things which it is my job to, get that out of him, is really make it so interesting that you want to know more about, the brain and its various aspects. And one interesting fun fact is that the Warrior Clinic is actually launching tomorrow, doctor, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a new clinic that will bring together preventive brain health and mental health, and in a one-of-a-kind format. I've already, been to his clinic, and there's a lot more I can share. And there's also Dr. Aditya in the audience. He's running Mammoth Memory Care. That's in Sion. And what you will realize through these conversations is that, there is a new wave of clinical practice that's coming in psychiatry, neurology, psychology, neuropsychology. Jwala Narayanan from Manipal Hospital will also be joining us shortly, and it will be a really, really rich discussion. So with that, Dr. Siddharth Warrior, would love to have you on stage. So the topic is mental health in the age of AI. As you can see, I am, however, not carrying my mobile phone. And I want to make it very clear that for this session, the questions that I prepared were actually not used by ChatGPT. I used ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity. But, just to keep it interesting, there are a few questions which I will keep throwing in, which are my own. When we meet for lunch, tell me which questions are from ChatGPT and which questions are, like my own, okay? So that's a little exercise for all of us. So stay tuned. And we'll bring something like a gift hamper going for the first person who tells me that this was not a ChatGPT question. Okay, a little icebreaker to begin with, okay? I've been to both your clinics and spent time with both. I've seen patients, I've seen how empathetic. I think the one thing that really is common to both of you is like the empathy that you bring to the table. Normally in both psychiatric and neurology clinics, this is unfortunate about India, you will see that the busy clinics churn out patients at 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 7 minutes, that's the time that they have. When I go there, I'm waiting because the same patient, they are spending time. So this comes with like a real kind of personal perspective. So the question is, this is the end of the day. You have already seen 20 patients, and there is a gentleman, lady who walks in and says, Doctor, I have early onset Alzheimer's. I have done ChatGPT, I have done Claude, write me the medication. Remember, you are tired at the end of the day and you are listening to this patient come in and just say that I have self-diagnosed myself. I know this is right. Don't tell me what to do. Give me the medication. How does a neurologist address this question differently from a psychiatrist? So let's get started there. That will give us a little window into your world, and then we'll open up for more questions.
Well, I think I've worn the right clip for that, which is take a deep breath. So step one would be for me to take a deep breath when something like this happens. One of the challenges in modern medicine is that the way we go through residency, what we are taught in our MBBS, MD, DM, is to be very efficient when it comes to practice. The sooner you can diagnose a patient, the better a clinician you are. So all our professors would tell us that watch the patient as he walks in. Before he sits down, you should know what is happening. And it is considered a point of pride. And in government medical colleges, I did my MD in KEM, and 70 patients, 100 patients in one OPD was the norm. And so somewhere almost at a core level, we are wired to fatafat nipta do. Jaldi se, come on, get it, 2 minutes diagnosis, treatment out. As long as the diagnosis is correct, nobody minds. Once you enter private practice, you realize that there is so much more to a patient than simply those symptoms that they come with. And that so much more is mental health. That is what every doctor eventually runs into, whether it's a neurologist, cardiologist, ENT, everybody runs into that part. And there's no word for that. People call it soft skills. People call it experience. कि ये doctor अच्छे हैं, ये सुनते हैं. This is all part of dealing with that person's mental health. And none of us are trained in order to do that. Some of us figure it out on our own, and we think we are the only one until we come into a conference room like this and we realize, oh, there are other people who are also feeling like that. So to answer your question of how do you deal with somebody who self-diagnoses, first thing is to make them feel seen. Because all self-diagnosis comes from fear. And probably because they've not been heard in other clinics, they were forced to do this. So make them feel seen and understand that this will take some time, because more than the memory problem, what we are dealing with is an anxious patient. So once we deal with the anxiety, even if it takes 10 minutes more in the first follow-up, the next follow-up will be much, much sooner. So that would be how I would go about it.
Okay.
This is something which has come very commonly nowadays. Especially it's common with youngsters, but still, if a old lady comes with this thing, that tells a lot about her. How much technologically driven she is, how anxious she is. Very rightly said, it's very enlightening to know a neurologist putting his brain into mental health. Because we both the departments work together in a corporate hospitals, but the approach is very different. But it's very nice to see Dr. Sid understanding the anxiety. So it tells how anxious this person is, how restless and quick answers and resolutions she is wanting. So that tells about her. But how I approach is that I'll definitely acknowledge that, yeah, you are right. ChatGPT is not always wrong. But there is a process I need to follow legally, medically. We need to get a diagnosis through the evidence. So if you say you are Alzheimer's, I'll run the test for Alzheimer's. If it comes positive, so Alzheimer's is not something like a depression which cannot come in PET or MRI. So if it comes, we'll definitely treat you. We'll not say you don't have Alzheimer's. But if there is any comorbidity, that we will help you to find out.
Yeah.
So being inclusive of what patient is knowing and not just saying it's not correct is something which I try to practice.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for that perspective. And you gave a very good answer, even though it was the end of your long day. So yeah. Moving on. I want to continue on that strand, Dr. Prakhar. I think one of the first use cases which just sort of blew up around the world was actually the chatbot dependency, right? Both in the case of, let's say, harmful use cases, and a lot of people also found companionship with like these chatbots. Tell us these experiences from your clinical practice, and we understand this is new. This is probably happening in the last 12 to 18 months. But I'm pretty sure that you have 14 years of experience. When you were studying psychiatry, nobody taught you a course on how to deal with chatbot-dependent adults and children.
Right.
Tell us a little perspective about how you're grappling with this tension in terms of what you have learned and what is now in front of you on a day-to-day basis.
We've definitely grown out of what we have learned in college. We were as a resident, like Dr. Sid said, OPD nikalo. That was the word. I was in JJ. So it was OPD निकालना है, कौन निकालने वाला है आज? ये 1 घंटे में निकाल सकता है, इसको 3 घंटा लगता है. That was the attitude. But of course, after OPD, there is an intense clinical discussion. There are clinical programs which happen that shape us, all of us. But we grow. As a professional, when we go into private practice, corporate practice, we grow. And this is something which we need to grow about. How to deal with patients who are, earlier patient would come with lack of insight. Now patient comes with overconfidence in partial insight. And we have to train them and tell them. So what I have done is, I have kept certain use cases of my own experience with ChatGPT. One of my son, 15-month-old, he had a neck swelling, and I visited a pediatrician, and I did everything on ChatGPT as well, simultaneously. I used to put in all the inputs the pediatrician has said, give this antibiotic, don't give this antibiotic. I did this follow-up for 15 days, next 15 days. I have all the records. The antibiotic my pediatrician in Bombay hospitals told me at the first day, ChatGPT said, do not go to linezolid, it causes bone marrow suppression, go to this antibiotic. Okay, I did that. Then I took a second opinion. The second opinion was from a different state. That doctor gave me second antibiotic. ChatGPT said, okay, go ahead. I went, go ahead. The third day, I had to admit my son because the fever was not reducing. I had to admit, and again I continued what the second doctor and ChatGPT was saying. ChatGPT was kind of agreeing to the second doctor. I did that. We spent 10 days in hospital, all right? And finally, we started linezolid. The swelling resolved in 3 days. This gentleman, doctor, I shouldn't take his name, but he was a specialist in infectious disease from Australia.
Right.
We didn't knew that before. Then we realized, me and my wife, wow, how come we missed this? So I have this one case scenario I show. Yesterday only I showed a patient. Very interesting case, but it will take a lot of time. But he came with all, nowadays patients come with 2 things. One is their own diagnosis. As per the ChatGPT symptoms, what the ChatGPT is saying, very humbly they can say, this is what my symptoms are. I have prepared through ChatGPT. They come with a second set of paper, what questions to ask from psychiatrist. That too ChatGPT is giving ki when you go to the clinic, ask these questions. So it takes a lot of time now to address these. But I have seen a lot of patients suffer because of this. It's not one way that it is beneficial only.
Got it.
There's a lot of patients who are suffering from it. But I don't usually discourage or say no for everything. I just try to find out where the ChatGPT has lost the context.
Yeah, got it. No, thank you for sharing that personal journey. I'm sure you're looking back at it and sort of narrating it. But imagine if somebody in your capability and position is grappling with the question, what is really happening to some of us, laymen in the room. Dr. Siddharth, this brings me to the next question, which is that when we spoke about you first, and we talked about preventive brain health, and it's another analogy of what you studied and what you're doing now actively with like real skin in the game, is you actively position your clinic as a preventive brain health and mental health clinic. Both of those words mean completely different things. And again, probably the word preventive neurology was not there in your course days, but you are now taking a stand to address it differently. Tell us about how did you come to that decision? Why that, and why not what you've already learned and practiced even at Namaha?
So this is a trend that has happened overall in medicine. And I can understand why, because for centuries we were dealing with so many far more serious problems like infection and all your preventable, communicable diseases. And it took time for us to solve all that. And our perspective was always on cure. How do you prevent malaria? You have to wait until you get malaria and then you cure it. And we sort of brought that same thought process into non-communicable diseases as well. And so when people started getting diabetes, blood pressure, our first focus was, okay, let's cure those who've already got it. And I think this is a sign of the times that our treatment for those diseases has reached a point where now we can start thinking about how can we prevent them. Now, when I decided to become a neurologist, the first thing that everybody said was, "Arey, neurology क्यों कर रहा है? इसमें कुछ treatment है नहीं. What will you do? How many people will you give aspirin to?" And they had a point. But as you get into treating more and more patients, you realize that the earlier you can catch them, the better. And I think the turning point for every doctor is realizing how everything is connected. Neurology is not isolated. Alzheimer is not isolated. If you have diabetes, the chances of you getting a stroke are more. If you have hypertension, the chances of you getting dementia are more. And then you realize that metabolic health is the core engine of everything, including cancer. There is a 40% reduction in the risk of cancer if you're metabolically healthy. So that makes sense. Our body is wired to take in energy and use it. That is the metabolic cycle. So once your metabolic health is good, automatically brain health becomes good, and automatically mental health also improves. So then you realize that you are fighting a battle far downstream, and you will never win if you don't go upstream and you don't fix the problem from where it is beginning. So for me, preventive health doesn't seem to be a deviation from what I've studied. If my goal is to help people with stroke and Alzheimer's and Parkinson, then I have to help them prevent diabetes. So for me, it's a continuation of that.
Got it. And staying on that, I think one of the ways you actively do this is by talking about some very simple things on your, like what do dreams mean, or what does REM sleep mean, and all that, right? So, do you have a comment before that? Yeah.
One of the issues is that people think a complicated problem will require a complicated solution. And when you tell them that, oh, it's just fixing sleep, it's like, "Arey, ye kya hai?" But fixing sleep is actually quite a complex process, because there are two challenges in preventive health. Number one is, unfortunately, our brain and our body gives us a lot of room for error. It is so resilient that even if you keep damaging, it will still function until it's very late. So that is one problem. If it was less resilient, we would have probably picked it up or taken it more seriously. The second is, denial is a very powerful tool. So all of us will avoid a problem unless it is staring at us in our faces. And once we recognize the problem, we will fix it. So the key to preventive health is recognizing very, very early on that there is a problem. And one of the unfortunate ways in which we do our tests is what we define as normal, I feel should be changed. So if cholesterol ka upper limit is 200, 199 is not normal. Because the equivalent to that is, suppose if you're driving a car and you miss the other car by 1 inch, you are not a good driver. That is the error that is the margin that you should keep. So if the upper limit of cholesterol is 200, target 110. Target a much lower level so that you have more margin. And you should apply that principle across the board for all metrics, including cognition, attention. Right? So that is the approach I'm taking.
And on attention, I think the most asked for use case from what we know at Ivory is now coming across as, Doctor, I think I have ADHD. Break this down for us in layman terms. And if we can do a quick test to see if any of them have ADHD, we can do that. But I know some people here in the room already think that they have ADHD. So what should we tell somebody who is probably not asking the question yet, but is saying कि डॉक्टर प्रखर को मैं साइड में जाके पूछता हूँ कि मेरे को ADHD है कि नहीं है? हमारे टीम में तो हैं 3-4 लोग जो बोल रहे हैं कि आज डॉक्टर प्रखर से we want to chat. So seriously, but you know, and I think the headwinds are very strong, right? Like screen, Dr. Sanjay mentioned, and AI is gonna like stick us even more closely. So essentially, you're essentially wiring your brain to instruments that has not been used for like thousands and thousands of years. So on ADHD, your 2 bits, and how are you addressing that in your clinic as well? And then we'll go to
you asked
questions.
to get a quick diagnosis.
Yes.
It takes 1 year to 2 years for a diagnosis in US and UK for ADHD. It's not very easy. The problem with ADHD right now, I am privileged to be sitting here and telling it to everyone. I want to tell to whole world. Adult ADHD is very new. And 90% of these adult ADHD, I have found anxiety, low mood, depression, amotivation, past childhood trauma affecting their vigor to start the work. It is not a new onset thing. It is mental fatigue at times. You're working 12 hours in front of laptop and then you want to start writing your new thing, new book. It's not easy. It was never easy, right? Then we were doing earlier, how much busy we were before 2000 or 1990s, let's say. People were very, very free. They would spend time with family. The brain was doing 10 things in a day. Nowadays, the brain is 24/7, or at least 12 hours, it is working non-stop. Don't we feel that there can be a fatigue in brain? Yeah? If the brain fatigues, it will show up as a low attention span, low memory, low remembrance. Why do we want to label it as ADHD? Because this old diagnosis have come in 50 years of research and stuff. Don't call it ADHD. You directly say ki I have difficulty, I have reduced attention right now. I want to treat it. I want to get improvement in that. Simple. It can happen. Someone can say do meditation, some can say sleep for 8 hours, and that can also help. I'll tell you why people want to get a label. ADHD is more a label now because it is an easy escape. A lot of institutes, a lot of organizations have provided accommodations for ADHD. And it is, in terms of mental health, it is something which is more acceptable than being depressed. So if you are labeled as ADHD, oh, I was born with this. And it is world accepted thing, and I'm no different. 50% are neurodivergent. So that provides a safe space. So if someone has ADHD, of course, the diagnosis is robust. There is a deep process to it. But if as an adult you feel I have ADHD, I would just say that don't label it as ADHD. You say I have difficulty in attention, I have difficulty in programming, memory, I am forgetting, I am not able to start my work. So label your symptoms only and let the clinician do a holistic assessment. Where are you lagging? It's possible your cognition is declining and you are thinking, oh, at 50 I have ADHD. All my life I had ADHD. Now please diagnose me for ADHD. The neurologists and psychiatrists will say, let me see your cognition first.
Yeah, got it. No, I think I see Jwala nodding this because, she's one of the one who keeps cautioning us that, don't go down this ADHD, route yet. Doctor Sid, your comments, because again, you are in the intersection of preventive brain health and mental health, and, we know you have addressed ADHD in your videos as well. Yeah. Your 2 bits as a neurologist.
Oh, I absolutely agree with Dr. Prakhar. Most of the ADHD cases that you see are somewhere related to an underlying sense of anxiety. And that makes sense from a neurological perspective because attention is a hard thing to do. Our brain is wired to pay attention to some things for a small amount of time, evolutionarily. Kids were never meant to sit for 8 hours staring at a blackboard. That never happens. In no other animal, in no other species does an infant or a toddler just sit and look at one place for a long amount of time. It's just that we have now developed this expectation that kids should do that. Similarly, in adults, the way that attention works is your brain decides that something is so valuable that this is going to help me evolutionarily. And there are two problems that has happened. Number one, for attention to happen, we have to have calmness around. So the way I put it is, attention is a sympathetic activity. There should be a spike of cortisol and adrenaline. There should be a sympathetic activity where we are focusing on one thing, but there should be parasympathetic activity around. So only if you're overall calm can you pay attention to one thing. None of us are overall calm anymore. So there is sympathetic everywhere. So if there is sympathetic everywhere, your attention will keep fluctuating because everything will call for attention. Your phone, your laptop, your friends, everything is calling for attention. So we have wired ourselves into a situation where we cannot focus. And the second thing is, every time your attention dips, which is natural, because attention is monitored by adrenaline and noradrenaline, and they have a fluctuating release. It's a pulsatile release in the brain. So every time noradrenaline dips, as it should, we do not have the patience to wait for it to come back up. So as soon as it dips, our mind automatically starts searching for other sources of dopamine. And we are all carrying an infinite source of dopamine in our hands all the time. So as long as that option exists, it takes a lot of willpower to say, no, I don't want that. And why would we do that unless we actively try? So these are the two reasons why attention is difficult. Like Sir said, it is not ADHD, it is a combination of these factors.
Perfect. I think we have assuaged a few fears in the room. So just a quick pause as we'll take questions. My only request to all the invitees is that please keep your questions brief and please ask a question, so that we can take advantage of them. And I also wanted to welcome Dr. Ratnavali Elajosiula, who is flown in from Bangalore, and Dr. Anup Amarnath. He is Chairman Geriatric Medicine at Manipal Hospital. Dr. Ratnavali and Dr. Anup, of course, know each other, but Dr. Ratnavali's introduction, is something that you all should wait for. And then, of course, her session is going to address, the new era of dementia, local reality that will be coupled with everything that's happening in global breakthroughs. That will be our keynote session for the day. And saddled in between very sweetly is a neuropsychological lens from Ms. Jwala Narayanan. She's also been with Manipal. What I wanted to say is that all three of them are from Bangalore. We are from Bombay, but please welcome them with a loud round of applause because they have really traveled far and wide for this event. So, let's give them a, taste of Bombay hospitality and warmth. And yeah, with that, questions. Please take this mic. Three of us.
So hi, my question is for Dr. Sid. So nowadays there's no lack of information. People do know what are the healthy lifestyle changes. Like whatever grandma was telling you to be true, science is catching up with it. But in my experience in the clinic so far, if I educate 10 families on healthy lifestyle changes, which I strongly recommend for whatever illnesses they have, I would say about 8 do not stay compliant on the follow-ups. They absolutely make no changes. 1 or 2 may because there are dire straits and they have to change. So what, like in your preventive clinic, what steps would you take to ensure that the compliance rates go up for lifestyle changes?
Yeah, that's a great point. I would draw a parallel with somebody suffering from addiction. If the person who is an addict comes into the clinic themselves, the chances are high that their treatment is successful. If the relative is dragging that patient, chances are low. So if somebody is coming to the clinic of their own interest, saying that I want to improve my health, their compliance levels will naturally be higher. If somebody is bringing their wife or their husband, saying, "Yari, inka lifestyle bahut kharab hai, we have to help them," we can assume that it is not going to be as successful. Either way, we should expect a dip in motivation. We cannot be constantly shocked that somebody started off with a lot of motivation and then it dips. This has been happening for years and years. Every gym knows that maximum memberships are in Jan, and in Feb everybody stops. I think we should account for this. We should take it into our protocol and create something that ensures there is accountability and follow-up in that dip. Because what we are talking about is habit building. Essentially, we are talking of health as a habit because there is no inherent motivation yet. Inherent motivation either comes from fear, which is the most powerful motivator, or it has to come from something positive. And that positive thing takes some time. So a good way that I use is, I started using Ivory's measurement as well. You take a baseline and you stick with them for 4 to 6 weeks until they see a spike. They have to see some aspect of their life get better. Once they see that first spike of something getting better, then it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Then they will know that it works. Even if they stop, they will come back. For me, it was my sleep. So I was overall healthy, my markers were okay, but my sleep, I thought was okay. The wearable really helped me. I realized that even though I felt like I was sleeping okay, I was sleeping for 6 hours, my score was low, I was sleeping at 2 a.m., which again, as a medical student, you always feel this is normal. But just simply tracking my sleep over a period of few weeks, I realized that this cannot go on. And the day it switched, and I felt my sleep improve, and I felt how my attention is better the next day, something shifted very fundamentally in my head. Then all the other decisions became easier. So we have to guide every person to that turning point where they feel something shifting positively.
Yeah. Should I? Yeah. Hi, I'm Akriti. I'm in the process of developing a parent counseling program or a family counseling program for children and adolescents with regard to executive functioning. And my question is, in the age of AI, because we're talking about that on this stage, what would be your advice to somebody dealing with that population and that demographic with regard to AI, the obsession with diagnosing, the obsession, like you said, with does my child have ADHD, and just general parenting anxiety?
So you are asking what would be the advice for parents?
What would be the advice that you would give to anybody working with parents, given that AI,
To the
everything
professionals,
that you
advice
must
to
have
the
dealt with?
professionals?
Yeah.
Oh,
With
okay.
professionals.
I think everyone comes with a good intent. When they have studied so much, they want to do good for society. It's very, very much useful program these days, But what happens is the parents are also busy in their lives. To be able to provide them crisp and evidence-based techniques would really help you as a therapist or as a founder to do something for parents. As a parent, I'm also a parent, I would love to do some program, but it should fit in my availability. That is something which will come in my mind. And of course, it should be the credential should be good, it should be evidence-based, the results should be visualized within a short span of time, so it should be programmed in such a way that the parents see changes very quickly, not over 5 years, 6 years. Like you say, you do this thing and 5 years later your son will be very intelligent. That won't click in. Anything for the behavior management, nowadays you can make modules related to digital addiction, related to eating behaviors, related to studying behavior, sleep routines. You can make different modules which every parent and child struggle with.
Yeah, that concludes this session. I know you might have more questions, but the good thing is if you just go to search Dr. Sid Warrior or Prakhar Jain, they both have independent websites, so you can leave a question there. Doctor, I'm just offering this on their behalf, like you will receive attention. Mention that you attended this conference, and like I know we're all on the edge of our seats, but I'm very keen to get to the next set of speakers. So thank you, Dr. Sid and Dr. Prakhar. And now we will welcome Jwala Narayanan. As I said, she's consultant neuropsychologist at Manipal Hospital and AMGH Hospital, Bangalore. She also runs a cognitive neurology clinic under the aegis of Dr. Ratnawali. I have had the pleasure, and honestly, it was one of the most uplifting experiences for me to know that such a clinician exists in today's world who is day-to-day working. Every week you have a program? Every week? 4 times a week, patients with dementia come into this clinic, they do activities, and trust me, that experience will change you. If you ever go to Bangalore, just go there as a silent spectator and you will realize I've seen people who are at early onset there, who are at very, very late onset, but the work that Dr. Ratnawali, Jwala, and their team are doing is really, really world-class. And yeah, I think with that, over to you. She has got some puzzles which I think, there's no puzzles, okay. Okay, all right, you can do this.
Great. Thank you very much, Isaac, for that introduction. And thank you all. It's great to be here. I grew up in Bombay, so it's always nice to be back. And it's amazing the change I got from, I think, Lower Parel to here in 30 minutes, which is unbelievable. So it's fantastic. So today's, my talks are usually very clinical, but today is a little non-clinical. And I feel for the kind of audience we have today, I think this message really needs to go out into the population, into everyone who can make a change for themselves and who can sort of try and prevent dementia. So I'm going to go over a little bit about some research, but then the rest of it is just practical suggestions. How do I? So I'm a neuropsychologist, and I cannot do justice to my profession if I don't test you this morning. So I'm going to test your attention and also give you a little bit of stimulation. So what I'd like you to do is on the next slide, you're going to have some numbers come up on the screen. So every time you see a number, you clap, except for the number 3. So that'll tell me how attentive you are. And after all the attention we've been talking about, we'll see how well you do and how long you can sustain your attention. Yeah. It'll get better, don't worry. Okay, fantastic. Well, that's just to give you a sense of what we do. And also, I love doing this because I always see that people get better. So the longer you do it, as you're training your attention, you actually get better. So attention training is very real. Yes, exactly. So I think it's really good. Right, so just, it's not clicking. Yeah, it doesn't want to go to the next slide. Are you able to move to the next slide from there? Right, anyway, so basically what I'm going to be talking to you, is about brain health, more from how can we prevent a decline, whether it's through dementia, and also how can we live as alert as possible, as healthy as possible, as we live longer. So Yakov Stern was not the first, but someone who really took this whole concept of cognitive reserve forward. And what they found in their research was that a lot of people who've had brain injury or any kind of insult to the brain there were some of them who still did well and some of them who declined very fast. And what they found was that the ones who actually did well were people who had some kind of cognitive reserve. And usually this cognitive reserve was education, exposure, so how you really build your intelligence. Now intelligence is not just IQ. I think, we sort of tend to equivalate intelligence to IQ, but even someone in a village who has had no education can be very intelligent. So I think that's very important. But yes, formal education does give that easy access to that intelligence. So we do know that the more educated you are, the more exposure you've had in life, the more life experiences, and now there's a lot of literature on being bilingual. So bilingualism can also create cognitive reserves. So there are various factors, like doing a hobby deeply, like playing music, can also create cognitive reserve. So we do know that there is something that's happening in the brain. It's creating stronger networks that makes you more resilient as you grow older. And Robert Wilson has also done work in looking at how people who have more cognitive reserve, who are more cognitively active, tend to have a slower decline even in people with Alzheimer's. So brain health is, that sort of got studied, and I know all of you here probably know about the Lancet Commission, and where it was a very, very popular paper that's come up. Of course, now there's a lot of discussions and controversies about it, but I think it still stands that resilience or cognitive reserve is not a single domain that you can train. You have to look at various aspects of your life, and what they really have sort of highlighted is right from your childhood and how your brain is and what it's exposed to it, and the kind of insult you might have had. If you've had a brain injury, then your risks of dementia go up higher. So right from education as a child to all your life circumstances, your health, your exposure, all that contributes to your risk of dementia. So no matter at what clinic you work, at what population you work with, I think this that you impart to a child or an adult or an older adult is very relevant. That you have to stay connected, you have to stay active both mentally and physically. And then this was also studied later now. I mean, there are lots of studies across the globe that's going on where they saw that people who do have some cognitive decline or mild cognitive impairment, when you actually do this multimodal intervention where you do, make sure they're eating well, they're exercising well, there's cognitive training, social activities, this can actually reduce the risk of further decline, or it can at least keep you at where you are. And we also see this sometimes in some of our patients with Alzheimer's, if they just regular physical activity does improve memory. A little bit, not completely reverse it. So just highlighting that it has to be multimodal. I'm not going to go over everything. I'm just going to keep it brief to what's relevant with the kind of work we do, I do. But what I'd like for all of you to do is just to, as I'm presenting the next few slides, to just think for yourself, because we're going to have a little discussion at the end of my talk as to what each one of you are going to do, whether it's a physical activity that you take on or if it's going to be cognitive and it's going to be social. So I feel these three are really important. Of course, all of them are important, but I think as we get older, these three are things that we really stop doing. So I want you to start thinking for yourself so that we can have a quick discussion and exchange some ideas, and that might spark an interest in someone else, right? So for activities and engagement, you need to have cognitive activities. That's everything that you're doing mentally, whether it's working or talking to people or doing puzzles, planning. Physical activities, both aerobic and strength, is highly recommended. Social interaction, going out for weddings, gossiping, excellent for the brain. and art and music therapy. So there's a lot of literature now coming in just being more creative and how that helps the brain as well. So how do we build our cognitive reserves? What I'd really like you all to think about is we need to go beyond crossword and Sudoku. So if you just do crossword every day, that is not enough at all. It's good, it's better than doing nothing, but not enough at all. So I want you to think about what more can you do. And it can't be a singular domain, so that's why a crossword or a Sudoku doesn't work as well, because it's just one domain. You're just doing that same puzzle. And if you do it from the same newspaper, you probably know all the answers. So it's really important to keep it as diverse as possible. And exposure throughout life continues. So if tomorrow a friend comes and says, oh, I'm going for a music program, and you've never gone for it, it's still good to go for it. So if you're saying no because you're not interested in it, say yes because it's good for your brain, right? So it's the same thing as eating something healthy. You don't feel like you want to go and junk, you want to go on Netflix, but when you do something that's a little more social, that's a little more engaging your brain, you're creating wider networks. And it has to be something novel, challenging, meaningful, socially engaging, and of course enjoyable. So think of picking up a new language, or a lot of us are bilinguals, but we don't know how to read and write in our second or third language. So maybe picking that up, maybe picking up a musical instrument, or singing, or dancing. So think of things that you can do where you're learning something new, and that automatically stimulates the brain. Physical activity, everyone's got their wearables and they're like, yeah, okay, I've done my 150 minutes of exercise, that's not enough. So I think we, as human beings, we've actually never, like Dr. Sid was saying as well, we never really sat in one place. We need to constantly keep moving. So whenever you have an excuse to move, move. So take the stairs, move from room to room if possible. If you're stuck in an office all day in front of the computer, get up every 20 minutes and take a walk and come back. Try and do something on, maybe if you're taking a call, walk and take a call, but try and keep moving as much as possible. Take on other activities which are more natural, so you don't always have to hit the gym. And when you have something like, oh, I need to hit the gym, you're also causing a lot of barriers between you and the exercise, because then you have to get out of the house, get into your gym kit, otherwise you can't hit the gym. So if you take on other activities like just watering plants or going down to the shop, instead of doing a blanket, walking to the shop, all that is physical exercise. So it's really important to think of how much you can get in a day. And as you get older, I think what's also important is your physical ability. We do all get frail, and that's just natural. So try to avoid falls, any sort of injury, because then that sets you back. So it's very important for you to also advise your patients to look after themselves. So if they do need a walking stick, they should use it, because if they have a fall, then that's going to affect them further. So I really feel if the wider your social network, or rather the more you engage in socializing, not a wider social network, the more you engage in socializing, the more your brain networks are getting strengthened. And I think it's a very natural way of cognitive stimulation as well. So if you just think of being on your own and on your phone, rather than going out and meeting someone, you have to remember who that person is. You have to remember what you spoke to them about last time. So there's a lot of cognitive stimulation that happens when you are socializing. So it's extremely, extremely important. So try and think of yourself again. What can you do to improve that socializing? Can you join a book club? Can you join an exercise club? Or can you, organize get-togethers regularly where all of you sit and play a game together? So try and think of what can you do for yourself, and what suggestions can you give patients who come to see you or families who come to see you. And this, again, automatically reduces as we get older because of mobility issues, or people pass away. So try and think of how can you keep doing it. And the reason I am stressing on for you to think of it now, no matter what age you are in, is because as we get older, the capacity to think of ideas also goes down. So it's something very simple to you now, and you might say, yeah, I'll just do this book club, or I might just go somewhere and meet a few friends. But when you get older, it just gets harder to even think like that. So it's very important for you to prepare ahead a little. And creativity. So there's a lot of research, like I said, that creativity promotes neuroplasticity. It enhances cognitive skills, boosts self-expression and self-esteem, and of course reduces stress. So as Isaac was saying, that we run these groups for people with dementia in Bangalore, and these are people with mild to moderate dementia and also moderate to severe dementia. And this is really first-hand experience where we've seen that everyone, no matter what age, they really enjoy the act of playing with color or working with something that's, something that's new. So if I just give them like a sheet of paper and colors and say draw, then of course they feel like they're being treated like children. But we give them bottles and we say, okay, paint this. So there's some curiosity that, oh, what can I do with this? So you automatically see that it is lighting up something new. So even with people who have mild cognitive impairment or dementia, you can see changes, or it can really help. So doing all this is not foolproof. You can still get dementia, and I think that's something that I don't want you all to go away, because a lot of the times people who do get mild cognitive impairment or early dementia, they feel like they've done something wrong. So sometimes the pathology is in the brain, and there's not much that we can do about it. But if you do all these things, then it is still slower, and you can be more independent. So I think some of the good habits that all of us should just be doing is having some kind of routine and maintaining a good, healthy lifestyle. And like I said, there's no age to start that. We should be training our children to be healthy and to exercise, to eat healthy, make good choices, good sleep hygiene, try and be organized. So what I see is a lot of my patients with Alzheimer's, the ones who are perfectionists, who are not the anxiety-driven ones, but the ones who are organized, who've had a very ordered, calm life, are the ones who actually do quite well, where it's just the memory going, but they're still able to function largely and enjoy life as well. So try to get some organization and reduce multitasking. As I think we've already had a few conversations, we're all doing too much. Right, so this is just a few technologies. If you can just take a picture of this. But there's a lot of technology there for people with mild cognitive impairment or people in an early stage dementia. And the reason why I emphasize on this is it helps them be more independent. So if they are forgetful, if they use reminders, if they use like an Alexa, it makes them more independent, which means they will be more cognitively active. So do push them to use different modalities that can help them be more independent. Right, so that's my talk for this morning, and there's a whole team that works. Dr. Ratnavali is here, and Dr. Anup is at Manipal, so you can reach out to us. But maybe we can just take a couple of sharings of what people have come up with, so it'll be nice to see if anyone can take some ideas back home.
Great presentation. Would be nice if this could be shared with everybody. I think, a lot of takeaways from this.
Yeah, sure.
And simple things that we can do. I've recently taken up golf. Very challenging sport, very demanding, but those 4 hours, I'm not multitasking. I'm only looking at that one damn ball.
Absolutely.
How to hit it correct and straight. Great physical activity. I'm walking 12,000 steps.
Super.
I'm in the outdoor. I'm with great company.
Yeah.
Away from my phone. Yeah, I think so. I personally think taking up a sport, hand-eye coordination, so many good things. So I think for me, taking up a sport has really worked well.
Yeah, excellent. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, great.
Hi, Jwala. Excellent work you've been doing. And I'm doing a very similar work. I'm a game therapist.
Okay.
And we've been doing awareness programs on preventing brain decline through games. So this is something that I have been telling everyone that, you know, when you play games or you build a culture of playing games at home on a daily basis, I have about 500 plus games at my place. And that's why lockdown was not an isolation for us. All our building people used to be at my house partying every day with the games. And you know, this is something I say that when women do facial once for the first time, the effect goes away after 3 or 4 days. So, you know, we feel, oh, facial ho gaya, but kya fayda? Later on it went away. But when you do month on month, after a year, the skin has improved. The same is with games. When you're playing on a regular basis, 1 or 2 days will bring happiness. But if you leave it at that, the effect goes away. So it is something that you need to build. Playing, because there are, you know, the release of happy hormones and multiple things that trigger, you know, so many brain functions. Because games actually are able to cater to all of the cognitive functions, the attention, the processing speed, the short-term memory, multiple things. And this is something I tell people, build the culture of playing games on a daily basis at your own house.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. I think there's someone at the back and someone there as well.
Oh.
Okay, hi. I'm Mona. I'm an occupational therapist. And so I deal with pediatric and geriatric both. And absolutely what she said is like game. And now it has been, a lot of people will know the Mahjong is in air. And a lot of women have started playing. It really improves your cognitive ability. And as we know, like pickleball.
Yeah.
So that is also coming up little easier than the lawn tennis, and also both these games really help. And what I've noticed is when we start something new, which we were not knowing, like a simple thing when I used to go to gym, it's like so much routine, your thoughts keeps on going while you are doing exercise. But now I started doing Pilates, and then I actually need to concentrate much more on the instruction, and there is no scope for me to
really
go in my own zone. So I think something like this really helps. So
Doing
yeah,
something
that's-
new. Yes.
The last question to the perennial backbencher. You know, we are in the era of AI and smartphones. When will we become smart? Actually.
I think we're already very smart and much smarter than AI. But you can use AI to give you some ideas if you want, because it gives you a lot of ideas. I think it's.
I ask this because I'm sure there is not anyone in the audience who can remember more than 5 mobile numbers, whereas we used to remember all of them when we didn't have mobiles, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe your spouse, your children, your parents, that's it. Beyond that, I don't think it's easy nowadays to remember mobile numbers. Whereas when we were using the dial phones, we used to remember all our numbers.
I agree. I think
So
yes.
that is why I asked.
Yeah, no,
When
you're
will we
right.
become actually smart?
You're right. I think with mobile numbers we don't, but then we're also doing a lot of other things that we were not doing many years ago. So I think it's compensated. But yes, I think too much screen is not good. That's singular. So think of multi and think of different ways that you can stimulate the brain. Should we take one last comment? Yeah.
So, ma'am, I also did all my qualification from Manipal, proper Manipal, Udupi. I have a quick comment, but before that, as we know, we are the diabetic capital of the world, right? We are number 2 in obesity. We are number 2 in childhood obesity. We are number 1 in cancer, and we are number 3 in fatty liver disease or MASLD. I just wanted to make a comment about the muscle. You know, you mentioned about aerobic and strength training. So muscle is metabolic and longevity currency, and protein is its substrate, right? Now, muscle is a cognitive organ. That's what I wanted to drive home. If you care for your brain, you need to strength train. It's not about, see, muscle is not just about looking younger. It's about aging younger from inside out, right? And muscles are not built in the kitchen. They are built in the gym. So no matter how much of protein you consume, unless you go to the gym and use it, it's of no use. And finally, plant protein over animal protein any day. Because it's not just about longevity, it's about vitality also. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
We'll move on to the next session now. The last two, expert speakers. I would now invite Dr. Anup Amarnath to join us. He brings with himself close to 20 years of experience, a lot of them both, as somebody who's very deeply invested in geriatric medicine, as well as now in his new role, leading Manipal Hospital's charge into the longevity area. And I'm sure, you are all sort of heard this word longevity, and there is no one better that, we could find in India, to be very honest, to speak on this particular subject. So if you think about the train of how today's session has gone, some awareness we gave you about cognitive screening, then we brought about the fact that how you should prevent serious neurodegenerative conditions. Now we will give you a little tip of how you can actually extend your lifespan. And that's what Dr. Anup will talk about through a couple of presentations. Welcome, Dr. Anup.
I've set my timer to 20. Okay, good morning, everyone, and fantastic to be here. Thanks to Isaac, Rahul, and the entire team for putting this together. So the next 20 minutes is going to be hardcore clinical. So, and we'll divide this into two parts. Normally during a talk, we always say what we should be doing, but we'll split it into two parts. In the first one, I'll talk about what we are actually doing. And then in the second half, we'll tell you why we are doing what we are doing. So that would make more sense. So the question was, brain health, is 100 the new normal? We have about 10 centenarians with us whom we've been treating, and most of them are, we've been treating them for the last 10 years, so since their 90s. And we have a lot of septuagenarians and octogenarians. So the question is, are we going to take them all the way till 100, and what it does take to bring them to 100? So briefly, in the first half, we'll look at what we're doing to kind of ensure that we take them towards the century mark. So we'll talk about dementia management. A lot of it has been discussed earlier on. We'll talk about managing diabetes in the elderly. As someone said, India is the diabetes capital of the world. And just as of yesterday, you had the GLP-1 analogs coming off their patents, and you have a lot of generics coming up from today. In fact, we had a meme shared by one of our doctors in our group saying that 6:30 in the morning, you had the medical rep joining him for a jog, saying that these are the new generics which have come up. So, and then certain very niche interventions which we're doing in the elderly as of now. So we'll look at this, and then we'll look at why we are doing these things. So dementia, a big problem which requires a large-scale solution. And this was probably a brief about the genesis of what we discussed with Ivory. So we wanted a scientifically valid, population-based, technology-enabled tool to make sure that we screen a lot more people than the MMSEs which we're doing right now. So that was actually the preliminary discussions which we had with Isaac, Rahul, when we, Ivory started off. So we'll not talk about what is dementia. I think a lot of people have spoken about that. Sorry, it's moving a bit front. So when we diagnose dementia, there are three broad categories of diagnosis. One is the radiological diagnosis, how the brain is actually functioning. Second one is the biochemical diagnosis of what markers we use. And the third one is the clinical diagnosis. So the clinical diagnosis is where Ivory and tools like that we tend to use very frequently now to have a population-based screening. But if you look at the radiological diagnosis, so this is something which we do at the hospital. It's called as an FDG PET. It's a type of scan which clearly tells us which parts of the brain are functioning how much. It takes about 30 minutes to 45 minutes exclusively for the brain to diagnose not just dementia, but also mild cognitive impairment, and also diagnosing a normal brain as well. So what we find different is if somebody's got Alzheimer's, there are certain areas, which is the parietotemporal and posterior cingulate, which get affected. Number two, if somebody has a mild cognitive impairment, you see hypometabolism in the parietal lobe and the cingulate lobe. And then an age-related hypometabolism. This is very important because a lot of people have just age-related memory loss. So that's not mild cognitive impairment, that's not dementia, that's not Alzheimer's, and this is extremely good for us to identify age-related hypometabolism. So not all memory loss is dementia, not all memory loss is Alzheimer's. Some memory losses are mild cognitive impairment, but most of them are what we call as age-related memory loss. So I think the FDG brain is an important tool for us to diagnose that. Apart from the radiological, we'll also look at biochemical markers. And it's a busy slide, but if you can just focus on the right side, the markers that we have. Now, the important thing about these markers is the fact that these can be diagnosed almost up to a decade and a half before somebody develops dementia. So I think it's criminal for us not to use these markers when you can diagnose something 15 to 20 years earlier than when the actual clinical diagnosis comes in. So you have the amyloid beta, you have the tau proteins. A lot of these are markers which we can use much, much earlier before the onset of dementia. Then these are the new markers which have come up, but I think suffice to say we'll just go back to this slide and see that those are the markers, amyloid beta, tau protein. There are two different types of amyloid beta, and these are the ones which we're using to kind of diagnose dementia. So you have the radiological part of the FDG, you have the biochemical part, and then you have the clinical part where tools like Ivory help us to screen people for both mild cognitive impairment and dementia. But it's not enough if we know that somebody's got dementia earlier on. It's also important to know how we treat it, because what was a death sentence earlier on has got a lot of options in terms of treatment. So if you see the immunomodulators, so we are one of the first few centers to be using lecanemab. And this is not yet approved by DCGI, but this is on a named patient basis. So we have a patient where we have actually applied to the DCGI to enable us to give. It's an intravenous infusion. And one of the biggest advantages that we've seen is that there's a 23% improvement in the overall cognitive function. So I think one of the promising drugs, I would say, that, of course, the cost is something which we'll have to bear in mind, but this is something which, on a named patient basis, in mild to moderate and even to a certain extent in progressive and advanced Alzheimer's, is what we could use. Approved by the FDA, but in India, I think we need a named patient approval. The other thing which we run one of the largest clinical trials in terms of mild to moderate cognitive impairment is a molecule called EGB761. And we're the center which has the largest number of patients who are on this particular drug. Essentially a ginseng extract, the brand is called Tebucan, and what we've seen is a fantastic improvement, or rather slowing down the rate of progression of dementia, and particularly helpful in mild to moderate dementia. In those people with slightly advanced ones, we tend to use rivastigmine. Biggest advantage is that this comes as a skin patch. So people who have swallowing difficulties, of course, they have memory issues. So the caretaker, sticks this on to the person's skin, and we change it every day or every other day. And it gives you a sustained release of rivastigmine into the body. So novel approaches in terms of addressing dementia with these treatments. And so as I said, it's not enough to know what we should be doing. It's also important for us to share what we're actually doing on the ground so that this can be replicated elsewhere. Now, we'll quickly move on from dementia to diabetes because, as somebody mentioned, India is the diabetes capital of the world. And if we do prevent or control diabetes, a lot of cognitive impairment and comorbidities can be controlled. So about 10 days ago, we published India's first national guidelines for managing diabetes in the elderly. And of course, that's a different topic altogether. But to give you a brief summary of what we're looking at in India's new guidelines for managing diabetes is hypoglycemia prevention is the primary goal. It's not A1C management, so there's no specific A1C level. So if you have a young elderly at their 60s, so you can keep 6.5 as the A1C target. If you have an elderly with multiple comorbidities, you can go up to 7.5. And if you have a very elderly who's homebound, bedbound, A1C doesn't matter. A1C can be 8.5, but you look at hypoglycemia prevention. So these are the new Indian guidelines which we have just published. I'll probably share that with you. And that looks at how we categorize elderly in terms of their functional ability and then decide on how strict the diabetes control needs to be. So these are the new guidelines. Broadly, don't look at A1C, but look at the comorbidities and the functionality before deciding on what medicines to use. And somebody also brought this up, off patent, the GLP-1 analogs, and extremely useful, not just for diabetes management, but also for overall metabolic health. A lot more research needs to be done, but suffice to say that once they're off patent, the costing is going to come down. And one of the better molecules, not just for diabetes management, but overall cardiometabolic risk reduction. In terms of monitoring, I'm sure most of you have seen this, particularly helpful in the elderly, where you cannot, keep pricking them and monitoring the sugars. And then when you're making changes to their diabetes management, the CGM patches, the continuous glucose monitor patches, are something which we very frequently recommend in the elderly for those who cannot manage sugars by themselves. So somebody asked me, is this the best time to be a diabetic because of all the advances in the monitoring and treatment? Honestly, there's no best time to be a diabetic. Okay, certain niche interventions we'll quickly look at, which you're doing at the hospital. We'll skip through the A1C, that's a different talk altogether. And this is, apart from diabetes, cardiovascular disease, infections are one of the major risk factors which bring people into the hospital and impede the longevity. So as in when you age, your immunity goes down. So this is one of Karnataka's first antibiotic pouch into which a pacemaker was put in and placed in a 94-year-old gentleman because his immunity was very low post-COVID, and then we couldn't afford to have a pacemaker which could get infected. So this is one of the first few instances where he had an antibiotic pouch into which the pacemaker was done and then put in. And finally, this is a new device which we've been using for elderly people with high risk of stroke. It's called a Watchman device and goes into the left atrial appendage, kind of an umbrella which we close it because bulk of the strokes happen from the left atrial appendage. And once you stop that, then the risk of stroke comes down. So these are some of the niche interventions which we do at the hospital. So in the next set of 5-10 slides, we'll talk about why we're doing these kind of top-end interventions. Can we swap the slides, please? Okay, so you'll see a different kind of look and feel to the slides, which I'm bringing up. These were the slides which were made by my son, so he just sent it to me. And you can see that the cognitive function of mine and his are vastly different, and his brain age is kind of in line with his chronological age. Mine is probably way off my chronological age. We'll quickly touch upon that. But, this is the next 8 to 10 slides are the reason why we're doing the first 10 to 15 slides. So let's quickly look at this. The concept of biological age versus chronological age. So what is a brain age gap? It's a gap between the predicted brain age and the actual age, the chronological age. It's not enough if we just look at this. We're running a longevity center at Manipal, which specifically we intend to look at the biological age of a person. Because once you know the biological age, then you can differentiate between what the chronological age is. So fairly cutting edge. These are based on DNA methylation and telomere length. And that's exactly how you differentiate the biological and chronological one. Now, we'll quickly look at the neurobiology of brain aging, why it's important. So there are various things which actually happen in the brain as and when we age. You lose the synapses, the hippocampal goes into atrophy, there's an overall white matter degeneration. So this is the biology of what happens, but let's also look at these cellular mechanisms. So what happens when all these things happen at a cellular level? If you go back to your medical school, you have the mitochondria, ATPs, Krebs cycle. The biggest impediment for us was to remember the Krebs cycle and the 38 ATPs which came out. I still don't know how those 38 ATPs came, but Krebs cycle still gives us that. But essentially, what tends to happen is the mitochondria gets damaged. So the ATPs get damaged, and there is an oxidative stress. But if you look at the overall concept of aging, as I said earlier on, there are three broad categories that you look at. You look at the imaging, which is the radiological factors. You look at the fluid biomarkers, as I said, amyloid beta, you have the neurofilament light, and you have the functional markers. So that is where, platforms like Ivory and tools like Ivory are used. So if you have all these three, that's the only objective way you can assess a person's biological age. And then biological age becomes extremely important in terms of determining longevity. So all the tools, whether it's radiological, tools like Ivory, fluid biomarkers, in totality give us a very good idea of how the biological age of a person is. So the question is, why do we need to monitor the biological age? So let's look at this. Predicting the brain age. So you can have the scans, you can have the biomarkers, and there are a lot of AI models also which predict that. But here is what we're looking at. So we need to look at the preclinical phase where aging actually begins. And the reason why we see where aging actually begins is that's exactly the time where disease actually begins. So as I said in my first set of slides, you have an extremely good 15 to 20 years, and it's criminal not to use those 15, 20 years of time lag for us to intervene. So in this day and age, we have a lot of interventions, which I showed you in my first set of slides, and this is kind of something which tells us, can we do that much earlier on to ensure that we improve the longevity of a person? So in the 40s, you have normal cognition. In your 50s is where there's a silent accumulation of beta amyloid. 60s, where the tau protein builds up, there's cognitive dysfunction. And then the last, couple of decades is where the functional disabilities happen because of these biochemical malformations. Now, if we look at this one, early detection, apart from the radiological ones, we can also look at EEG analysis. So this is not something which we do very regularly, but if you want to add on to the radiological, biochemical, and clinical one, I think the electrophysiological evaluation of the brain also gives us a better idea of how the brain's functioning. Now, if there is one take-home slide today, I think it would be this: the systems biology of aging. Now, if you look at the top two there in the blue square, in the blue box, the brain clock, 1.3 times the rate, and the immune clock, 1.4 times the rate. Now, what this tells me is that if I can address brain health, number two, if I can address the immune health. So these are the two key things which help me improve the biological age of a person, and as such, the longevity of a person. So if these two things are something which we can measure and intervene, I don't know how many of you have read, there's a book by John Deere called Measure What Matters, a big kind of book in the management circles. But this basically implies that, we need to measure what actually matters. You measure brain health, and why does it matter? Because it impacts longevity and health span. You measure the immunological clock, and that's because it impacts your longevity and health span. And if you see my top 4-5 reasons for a patient coming into the hospital on an emergency, it is infection, sepsis, falls, cardiovascular. So infection, a lot of it can be prevented. You have a lifetime pneumonia vaccine now, which you take once and it provides immunity for life. You have the flu vaccines. You have a lot of vaccine preventable diseases which you can kind of offer for the elderly. And then the brain health. You have a lot of interventions which you can do to improve the longevity. And in my last few slides, we'll specifically touch upon why the brain clock and brain health specifically. But suffice to say that if I tackle brain, if I tackle immunity, I think a bulk of my longevity question is answered. And finally, to answer why we are doing all these things. So if you see, interventions like cellular repair, inflammation reduction, and neuroprotection, if you see the cognitive health span trajectory, the bright blue one and the one which has a rapid decline, if you see the disease threshold, so the disease threshold kind of comes into play when there is a rapid decline in cognitive health. But if you can maintain the cognitive health, the disease threshold doesn't touch the person. So this is exactly the reason why brain becomes the primary, it's the master command center. And the reason it's a master command center, it's because not just your neuroendocrine mechanism, but also your autoimmune mechanisms. So if you keep the brain healthy, you keep the disease threshold out of it, despite the fact that it's aging. But then if the brain health goes down rapidly, the disease threshold comes up. So that's where the longevity gets affected. So my last slide, I've got 8 seconds, I'm on time. So as I said, brain, the master command center. Early detection is not just viable, it is feasible in this day and age. It's feasible in this day and age. And what we set out to answer in the first set of slides is 100 the new normal. I can safely say that it is plausible. It is also possible because we have done that at the hospital. Yes, 10 centenarians with us. That's a combined man years of 100 years, a century. And that's our clinical evidence, which we've been working on. But this is the biology behind what we are doing. So overall, to answer what we set off to answer was that is 100 plausible? Definitely so. And how is it possible? What we just looked at. Brain plays a big part of longevity and measuring what matters, the biological age versus the chronological age, and definitely the interventions that we're doing will help us, make 100 the new normal. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anoop, for a great talk. Yes, we'll open for questions, and I can already see hands raised. Sir.
QEEG assessment for the brain mapping. QEEG assessment.
Right. So we can probably go back to that, the EEG assessment here. So we can probably take a pic of this one. So the EEG assessment, as I said, by itself is not something which we would recommend, but what we would say that is along with biochemical, radiological, and clinical, the EEG assessment is something which will give us more validation of how the biological is. Brain mapping? Right. Right. No, I think what I would suggest is rather than one, we would want to look at this entire thing in total. So what is the FDG brain saying? What is the markers? What are the markers saying? What is Ivory scan tab saying? Plus what is the brain mapping saying? I think I would want to go with all those things in total before using one as a predictive marker. The gentleman here? Yes, please. Yeah, go on. Okay, yeah.
Yes, first of all, really enlightening lecture specifically on longevity and approach towards it. I belong to a fraternity which is an Ayurveda or integrative approach about it. So there are particularly that I'm studying for last half a decade about particularly anti-amyloid activities or defringements of these via nasal pathways and integrative approach with particular Ayurvedic medications which are lipo-dissolvable or lipophilic. And they have shown a promising effect on these particular scenarios or these particular disorders. I wanted your take on it, if there is any integrative approach which has already been practiced.
Absolutely. I think, the allopathic approach is one angle through which we are looking. Of course, we've been trained only in that approach. I may not be the right person to comment on that. But one of the things that we saw was in terms of the anti-inflammatory effect, which, inflammation and oxidative stress. These have a big bearing on DNA methylation and telomere length. So we have seen a lot of things like yoga, which has a positive effect on the DNA methylation and telomere length, primarily by reducing, the inflammatory component and the oxidative stress. So I'm sure what you're discussing about the lipophilic component will have a bearing on reduction of the inflammation and the oxygen-free radicals coming up. So I would definitely say that it has to be an integrative approach. As of today, we may not have many, science-backed trials to confirm that, but I think that's something that's the way forward. Yes.
So thank you for that excellent talk. So taking cues from Jola Narayan's finger study model that she showed about multimodal intervention. So at your clinic in Manipal Hospital, do you also have structured interventions for, say, diet and nutrition, exercise regimens, hand-holding them, because exercise in the geriatric age group might be a little different from others,
right,
as well as, say, cognitive stimulation activities for them in a structured way, which is documented over time. So do you do that in your practice?
Yeah, so as a part of our longevity program, what we have set up is, this is the assessment part. And the biggest thing that we want to do is not just assess and leave it, but also initiate the intervention part of it. So the intervention is multimodal. Of course, the clinical intervention, whatever we see, the nutritionists, they do something called as the MNA, which is a mini nutritional assessment. And then they assess, where the issues are. Serum albumin is a very good marker for us to see the nutrition. And sarcopenia is a big issue with the elderly. So the nutritionists specifically work on that part. We also have a fantastic rehab team which do assessment. 3-4 basic ones which we've made a part of the longevity program is hand grip. Hand grip is a very good indication for longevity. The second one is the get up and go test. So the time which an elderly person takes to walk a meter and come back, that's a very important marker. And the third one is the gait and balance assessment. So we have something called as the Gait Master. It's an instrument which objectively assesses a person's gait and balance, where the center of gravity is, and which muscle group needs to be addressed. So that forms a part of the physical intervention. So we have the cognitive intervention, physical intervention, nutritional intervention, and our part of clinical intervention is a small part, but I think the rest of it form a major part of the interventions.
Let's do one last question. I think Dr. Prem has the mic.
Hi, Dr. Prem. So just a brief introduction to Dr. Prem. He's one of the leading geriatricians in Mumbai and Jaslok Hospital. So very good friend of mine. Yeah, go on.
Ultimately, sometimes it's not in one single place.
True.
Sometimes it's in multiple floors, sometimes it's in multiple buildings. So how easy and how does it affect follow-up? Because ultimately as geriatricians, we want to see change.
Right.
So how do we motivate them? I mean, it's a practical question because we all have faced loss because of the fact that they might not actually go and do it.
Right. So I think, one of the major things which we defined earlier on when we set up the geriatric practice is the concept of care at the point of need. So it's not care where you can provide it, but where it's actually needed. So we have a care continuum. The acute care happens in the hospital. Then the step-down care happens in the rehab centers. And then you have the home care team which picks up and provides care at the residents. So whatever programs that we have, you look at integrating that entire thing. So for example, the longevity thing, a bulk of all these sample collections and the DNA sampling happens at home so that they don't need to come into the hospital. But then certain interventions, like when we do the gait assessment, balance assessment, hand grip. So for that, they need to kind of come into the hospital. So I would agree that to a certain extent, it may be a fragmented care. But going forward, I think we'll try and see if what we defined earlier on, care at the point of need, the bulk of it can be delivered at the point of need. Okay.
Evoke and Evoke Plus. No one nowadays was banking heavily on them because semaglutide had proved, select, sustain, and all those step trials. Peripheral inflammation and improvement atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. But neuroinflammation is a different ballgame altogether. So what was the reason why the Evoke and Evoke Plus didn't meet the endpoints?
So, if you look at the whole GLP-1 analogs as a broad category, clearly, the way it works is out of the pancreatic, the GLP-1 domain. And we'll also have to look at what was the endpoint. The primary reason it was started off was still, all said and done, anti-diabetic medicines. So in the anti-diabetic domain, you have three components which you look at: FPG reduction, PPG reduction, and A1C reduction. So in all these, I think GLP-1 analogs had a very kind of significant role. The NNTs, which is a number needed to treat, was quite significant. However, when you look at the allied uses, this also happened with statins. Statin at some point of time was considered the panacea for everything, not just for reduction of the lipids. So when you extend the role of a molecule beyond what it actually does, that's when you run into trouble. So even for that matter, aspirin at some point of time, it was considered a panacea, not just as a blood thinner, but as an anti-inflammatory. So they look at aspirin, whether you look at statins, or even DPP-4s and SGLT2s for that matter when they came up. So in fact, SGLT2, you have very good evidence to say that it reduces urine microalbumin creatinine ratio. So could you use that in CKD to reverse CKD? Unfortunately, that's not a use case or an approved treatment plan. So whenever these new molecules come up, there is a tendency to increase the scope of indication. And that's where a lot of these trials fail. So if we stick to what exactly we're looking at, A1C, PPG reduction, they do fantastically well. Okay, I don't know. I'll leave it to Sumiti to decide.
Doctor, only one suggestion. You make a paper and a presentation with a title, 100 years is the new norm, because you showed one slide prepared by your son. 80 years of age existence is already prevalent in our country and around the globe. Create a paper and a presentation with the title 100 years is the new norm of healthy, wealthy and wise living.
Thank you, Dr. Anoop. It was a fantastic presentation. I hope everyone is feeling really recharged and wowed by that presentation and at super peak attention, because we have a really, really interesting talk coming up. I would like to introduce Dr. Ratnavali Elajusulia. She's a trailblazer. She's somebody I really look up to. She's a consultant neurologist and a specialist in cognitive neurology. She set up the first dementia clinic in India. Can you even imagine the year? Not 2025, not 2020, not 2010, but in 1998. We talk about how difficult talking about brain health, cognition is today. Imagine then. So she has really been an advocate, a spokesperson in this field. Her focus has been in frontotemporal dementia. And she leads a multidisciplinary cognitive neurology clinic at multiple locations, including Manipal Hospital, Annaswamy Hospital in Bangalore, as well as in Mysuru in the Neurocare Clinic. She is somebody with a behavior and cognitive neurology fellowship from the University of Cambridge in UK. Really, like her credentials would go into many more cue cards than I have here. But she's somebody who was awarded the Global Advocacy Leadership Award by the American Academy of Neurology. And mostly her work has focused on frontotemporal dementia, which is one particular type of dementia, and has published research that has driven the field forward in exemplary publications around the world. And I'm really excited to have her speak today on the topic of dementia from a local context. So today we have heard a lot about where the field is. Dr. Anoop has spoken about, how we can address longevity and really improve health span. And I think Dr. Ratnavali will help us understand what the local context is, how does the international best practices juxtapose to the local realities of India. Welcome, Dr. Ratnavali.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And I would like to thank the organizers, especially Ivory and all the co-organizers, Isaac, Sumiti, and Rahul, for this great opportunity. And we had come, so I trained in Delhi, and we had come to Mumbai for our neurology special posting at JJ Hospital and Bombay Hospital under Professor Singhal, who is a giant in neurology. So that's my first introduction to Mumbai. And we had a wonderful time here. So I'll be talking about dementia, like they mentioned when I started dementia clinic and was interested, and actually I was interested in behavioral neurology, but dementia constituted the major component of behavioral neurology. And all my colleagues were actually almost ridiculed me for taking an area where there is no treatment. What would you do? Patients come with so many complaints and it's not treatable. So now we are at the junction of path-breaking research in dementia in our lifetime. There are things which are happening, and I think that it's not unusual, because we have had breakthroughs in acute stroke treatment where we are dissolving the clot and patients are recovering, and we also have excellent immunomodulators in multiple sclerosis. So I think after many failed treatments in dementia, this is the time where breakthroughs are happening. So I'll be talking about some of the breakthroughs and how we can relate them to India and what we should do to move forward in this new era. So I'll be talking briefly about some of these important discoveries. One is the blood biomarkers, the anti-amyloid therapies, prevention trials, and use of AI. I believe that you already had one panel discussion on AI, so I won't be going into details. But so before we move on, so I would just like to briefly recapitulate what are the pathological hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. Sorry, you have a pointer, huh? So at the top in blue, you can see the amyloid plaques. Those are the deposition of amyloid, which happen outside the neuron. Then you have the neurofibrillary tangles, which are composed of the aggregated microtubules, the hyperphosphorylated tau, which is accumulated inside the neuron. So the most important thing we have discovered in this biology of Alzheimer's disease is that even though the symptoms happen 30 years before that, 30 years before that, you can see changes happening in the brain. So there's amyloid accumulation followed by synaptic dysfunction. Then there is tau, hyperphosphorylated tau, which is deposited. Then there is shrinkage of the brain, and then the cognition changes happen. So there is a large, at least 30 years before we see cognitive impairment in a person. Initially, the cognitive impairment will be in the stage of mild cognitive impairment, where there is no impairment of activities of daily living, and then you can have stage of dementia. So this is the most important discovery which has happened is you have a blood test now to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. So this is a real breakthrough. And I will show you how it's actually generating more and more research papers every week. So they are discovering more and more applications of using this blood biomarker. So there are many blood biomarkers which have been, like here you can see, for neuroinflammation, for tau, for amyloid, and also for synaptic degeneration. But the most important biomarker which has come is the plasma p-tau. So previously we used to diagnose Alzheimer's disease using CSF. So we would do a lumbar puncture, estimate the amyloid and the tau in the cerebrospinal fluid. Or in places where they used to do an amyloid PET. So you can see the amyloid here, which is in red, and this is a amyloid PET, which is negative. This is not available in India, and it's prohibitively expensive. So here comes the plasma p-tau 217, and this is as good as CSF or neuroimaging biomarkers to diagnose Alzheimer's disease. So just having a blood test, which is also very useful in the clinic because people do not like to get a lumbar puncture done, but a blood test is quite easy. So elevated p-tau 217 is the most sensitive biomarker for predicting cognitive decline at the preclinical stage. Like I mentioned, there are many other biomarkers, but this is considered the most useful, as I'll demonstrate here. So women have more commonly Alzheimer's disease, and we do not know the reason why. Only now it is being investigated. Previously, it was attributed to longer lives. They have a longer lifespan, and that's one of the reasons. But there seem to be also some biological mechanisms as well as socio-cultural factors which make them more prone to Alzheimer's disease. So here is one where we find that there is a differential response, tau response in them, because the plasma p-tau is elevated more in women as compared to men. They also have a higher tau load in the brain. Similarly, in this study, they could diagnose Alzheimer's disease 25 years before. So they found this was a healthy women aging. Longitudinally, they studied them. They had their blood samples, and so they estimated the p-tau now. And they could find out that the p-tau was elevated 24 years before they developed symptoms. And here, like Anup talked about different kinds of clocks. So here you have a tau 217 clock. So again, if a patient has the elevated p-tau, you can estimate with some amount of error when they can develop Alzheimer's disease. So these are some of the serious breakthroughs which are happening. And as I'm talking, there are more and more research is being published, which is quite gratifying. So there are some indications for biomarker testing. We don't test in all patients because some of the people may not want to know whether they have Alzheimer's disease or where they're going to develop Alzheimer's disease. So we need to talk to the patient, the person, as well as the family and decide whether it needs to be tested. But definitely if you're considering anti-amyloid therapy, also if people who have young onset dementia come and we want to know what is the kind of dementia they have, whether it's Alzheimer's or FTD or some other form of dementia, whether they have atypical symptoms, this is one of the important areas where we can do the testing. So in the Indian scenario, one has to be very careful because the presence of p-tau 217 doesn't mean Alzheimer's disease. Because we have already heard about cognitive resilience, so some people can tolerate the amyloid without having the disease or the symptoms. So even though we can predict to what extent they can develop the Alzheimer's disease, if an 80-year-old man comes and is living with his family, well supported, so it's not essential that we diagnose him with Alzheimer's disease. So we need to take into multiple factors before we do testing. So it depends what is the age of the person, what is the context, whether they're living in joint family. And also there can be false positive and false negatives in patients with CKD, diabetes, hypertension, obesity. So we can have a false positive or false negative. And another thing which is important, which we never discuss in India, is mixed pathologies may be the norm, especially in older people. So they may have Alzheimer's disease, but they may also have comorbid vascular pathology. they can also have diffuse dementia with Lewy body disease. So even if they have p-tau, they may be also having DLB. So we don't have very good biomarkers in terms of blood biomarkers for these other conditions. So those conditions may coexist. So it may not be a pure Alzheimer's disease. So there are definitely, like I mentioned, the field is evolving. There are also newer biomarkers which can even diagnose tau in the blood. So next we come to anti-amyloid treatments. Again, this has been a very exciting area. So there have been several drugs which have been developed, but none of them have succeeded except lecanemab and donanemab. So lecanemab acts on the amyloid protofibrils, while the donanemab acts on where the plaque is already formed. So there have been some path-breaking trials, and they recruited patients and they examined the effects. And there has been some 27% slowing in the CDR in lecanemab and 37% slowing in the CDR sum of boxes over 18 months. So these medications are very expensive. They cost around $32,000 US in US, and that doesn't include the cost of the MRIs, which we need to repeat every few months or few weeks. Sometimes the patient can have a reaction, so hospital visits, infusion, etc. So in India, it is estimated that the drug may cost around 25 lakhs per year. So obviously, it's prohibitively expensive. It also shows that only the rich will be able to afford as compared to, and it will not be approved by insurance. So the other problem with these medications is the risk of developing ARIA, that is amyloid-related imaging abnormalities. It can be in terms of an edema or a hemorrhage. So the risk varies according to the kind of infusion used. So even though we use it IV, but right now lecanemab is available subcutaneously as well. So basically patients are getting this medication when they have mild cognitive impairment. If you're proved that it is Alzheimer's disease by doing some kind of amyloid PET or CSF biomarker, and also patients with early Alzheimer's disease are receiving these drugs in US, in Japan, in some places in Europe. But it's not been approved by insurance in Canada as well as UK, Netherlands, I know for sure. So they have to get it privately. So this is another view. This view is by Espe, is a very well-recognized movement disorder specialist, professor of neurology at Cincinnati. So here you can see his view on anti-amyloid therapies. None of this is very popular, but if you see any kind of drug discovery and drug implementation in the world now, you see that patient advocacy groups seem to be having a major role. And the FDA is also riddled with problems. So how the drug gets approved or doesn't get approved is also a mass of contradictions and games, politics, you name it. So patient advocacy plays a huge role. The Alzheimer's Association in US is very, very powerful. And so they push the drugs. And they're effective. It's not that they are not effective, but they are not disease modifying. They do not cure the patient. So that we should remember. And the other thing is that patients who are, the way you select the patients, if they're very early in their stage of dementia, then probably we get a better effect. So this is one of the important papers which has suggested that there is something happening across the high-income countries where the incidence rate of dementia in Europe and North America has declined by 13%. So one of the reasons they think is lifestyle changes, control of risk factors, exercise, adequate sleep, cognitive activities, all that we talked about by brain health. So you've already heard about the worldwide fingers. This has just come in last month. This is a pointer study in US. So they conducted this study where they had interventions which were structured versus self-guided, and structured had multiple cardiovascular health, cognitive activity, physical exercise, healthy diet, social engagement, and there was definite effect of the intervention. So this is a very positive study, and it was done extremely rigorously across several centers in the US, suggesting that interventions do work in slowing cognition or to prevent cognitive impairment. So there's also a lot of interest in hearing, as Dr. you've already pointed out. So hearing is one of the risk factors in cognitive impairment in the Lancet study. So people are trying to see whether providing hearing aids will slow the cognition. So this study was actually negative, but they found that in a subset analysis, when patients had a high cognitive decline, that group improved with intervention. So I think that one of the reasons we look at any risk factors, we cannot look at it in isolation, because there is so much which happens through a life course of a person. Like listed here, socio-cultural, political, economic, environmental. So a person who grows up with abuse or childhood hunger, so there is effect on the brain, the growth of the brain. So we cannot look at only these isolated factors in Lancet Commission and look at a person. We have to look at the milieu of the person. There's so many opposing influences which can affect the growth of the person. So this is called basically syndemics, and they suggest that these risk factors and protective factors can cluster together, and that is what the population neuroscience considers through the life course of a person. How do these factors intervene? So it's very important. And the other point I want to make is when we're talking about interventions for the elderly and all, actually the important thing is that intervention should start in utero or in childhood. It is not like we need to intervene when they're 80 years old. That is not the principle. Better late than never, but everybody needs to start when they're young. But it's very difficult because human beings are very resistant to change. So we talk about all these healthy diets. So one thing I want to share is in all the Alzheimer's Association meetings, so they will give a soft drink and a packet of chips in lunch. You know, I've given them feedback so many times, but they continue to do that. So I think human beings are very resistant to change. We can keep telling, but it's very difficult to change our habits. So that's why you need to start them early. So when you give your children chips every day, they are not going to change when they are 60 years. You tell them suddenly, no, you need to eat healthy. It's not going to happen. So everything needs to start early. So I think Jwala has already talked about cognitive reserve. So it's a property of the brain that allows for sustained cognitive performance in the face of age-related changes in brain insult or disease. So education, occupation, leisure activities. But we are interested in bilingualism because in India, many people speak 2 or more than 2 languages, at least in urban India. So there have been a lot of studies on the effect of bilingualism and dementia. And so you can see that there have been differences in memory clinic studies as well as community-based studies. In community-based studies, there have been no advantage of bilingualism. But in the memory clinic studies, they find that there is a delay in dementia in people who speak 2 or more than 2 languages. So we investigated this in our clinic. So I'm not presenting all the data. I'm just presenting some snippets just to illustrate this point of bilingualism. So we have evaluated more than 2,000 patients over the last 19 years. And so we have around 1,561 patients of dementia. And what we find is that you can see, so I'm only showing these 3 subtypes of dementia and not the other dementias, only Alzheimer's, vascular, and frontotemporal. You can see the age of onset in monolinguals in FTD is 58, but in bilinguals it is 65. So we controlled this regression analysis for education, and we found that there was a delay of 8 years of age of onset in bilinguals as compared to monolinguals in FTD. It was not seen in other dementias. But obviously there were some limitations. The number of monolinguals was small. They were also less educated as compared to the bilinguals. So because when we talk 2 languages, so there is a concept of executive function. So we are selecting the language, then there is inhibiting the other language. So there's a lot of role of frontal lobe in that. So frontotemporal dementia, which definitely affects executive dysfunction. That's where we saw the important role of bilingualism, but not in other subtypes. So here I wanted to also show you our data on gender differences, which I already alluded to in the previous slide. So here we find that our women were less educated as compared to the men, significantly, and their ACE total scores were less as compared to the men. And men had more vascular risk factors as compared to women. But there was also difference in the dementia subtypes. More women had Alzheimer's disease, but all the other subtypes were more common in men. But this is what we found. Apart from bilingualism, there was also an effect of gender on the FTD. So women who had FTD presented much earlier as compared to men. So you can see that there was a distinct diagnosis as well as an effect of gender and linguistic ability in the GLM model. So whether there is, it's all because of education, whether because of their lack of occupation, or there are other definite biological basis for this kind of difference which we found across gender, obviously needs to be investigated. So there was a recent paper saying the same thing from a study from Canada, that bilingual men had higher cognitive reserve than women. Here, actually, their education matched. Still, the men had better cognitive reserve. So this is one application of AI in the differential diagnosis of dementia. So here you can find that they looked at how patients come to the clinic and how we make a diagnosis. They used machine learning models to say how can they predict different dementia subtypes, and obviously they performed 26% more accurate than neurologists. So the AI can also be used, harnessed very, maybe in the right way. So we need to find what are the appropriate ways to harness AI. Use it as a servant, but not let it master you. So I think that is very important. So with all these exciting things happening globally, what is the local scenario in India? So obviously it's sometimes dismal because still there is stigma and lack of awareness. So when we see in Bangalore, it's not representative of the country. So we see a lot of awareness. We see people who come to us with mild cognitive impairment, they come with subjective cognitive impairment. But I know that's not what is happening in Chhattisgarh or Bihar or somewhere else. So it's not representative. So there's a lot of inequity in India itself in terms of accessibility, affordability, and even medical specialists. So lack of trained dementia specialists is one of the main problem because people don't get enough training to evaluate dementias, whether in medicine or even in neurology and psychiatry as well. Lack of infrastructure, lack of culturally appropriate tests, people were talking about it. Lack of support services, and negative attitude towards dementia is very, very common. Many times the patient comes and tells us that the family physician said, oh, it's just normal aging, don't worry. There's nothing to worry, forget about it. So be an ostrich, bury your head in the sand and think everything is normal. Then come back to the clinician after 3-4 years and your MMSC must be 8, and they ask you what can you do at this stage. So obviously nothing can be done at a very advanced stage. But lots could have been done in the early stage. So other important thing is obviously financial cost, no lack of insurance, and everybody has to pay for, and healthcare is appalling in India, how much money they have to spend. They take loans which they never can. So as I showed in the globe, in the high income countries, the dementia incidence and prevalence is coming down. But in India, it's estimated that it's going to be a huge health problem. As this study from Lee et al., the longitudinal aging study in India, LASI, and they predicted that there are around 8.4 million persons in India at this stage, and by 2050, it will grow up to 11.4 to 15 million. And the World Alzheimer's report says that 90% of all dementia cases in LMICs go undiagnosed, which I can believe because the families don't take the person for any clinical workup unless they have some neuropsychiatric issues. That's when they go and go for evaluation. So there are obviously many barriers to this, and all of us are aware of it, from the patient and family, the clinician, the health system. And these are some of the comments which health workers have talked about, what are the barriers and what they face in the clinic. This is Alzheimer's health report, actually. A lot of stigma, or they come in advanced stages. But this is in 2000 that, sorry, there's a misprint, it's 2024. Just 2 years back, they did this survey again in low and upper middle and high income countries. So 84% of the general public, and please note, 68% of clinicians believe dementia is part of normal aging. So this is what we are grappling with. So this is one huge problem. They tell them nothing is to be done. And the other thing which I see, that even the blood pressure is not controlled. So 130/80, for instance, in a 65 is not normal. So the American Heart Society now recommends it should be 120/80 and below. So we don't even control blood pressure. Many physicians just ignore that 140/80 as it has nothing to do with them. So they don't even revise the blood pressure medication. So this is what I mean sometimes when the families are unaware, or they are not able to find out what is the problem, so they don't bring the patient. So here you can see the scan. It is showing quite striking atrophy. I think all of you can see it, isn't it? Appreciate. There's diffuse atrophy, even the temporal lobes are gone. So these are educated relatives. They report only 1 month history. So I've taken more than half an hour. I tried to ask for, when was the person exactly well, and so on. So these are some things which are very difficult, so it may be cultural, not really related to education. So we investigated this in our memory clinic. What is the delay in a diagnosis of dementia? And we found that 43% were diagnosed 2 years after symptom onset. But the caveat is that this is actually not so much delayed. But like I mentioned, this is an urban population, and all the caregivers were educated. Even the patients were educated. This is a highly educated sample, not representative of the whole India as such. But we found that the delay was longer for people with young onset dementia as well as frontotemporal dementia. So even if they present with 2 years or 3 years, so we don't know whether they round off the time. So they're not really clear when they are presenting. For instance, this study has shown, which is in US, Greece, and Turkey, you can see that the mean years were 7.4, 3.5. But the MMSE scores as well as CDR scores were much worse from patients from Greece and Turkey, suggesting that actually even if the duration, its only apparent duration is short, they had much severe disease when they presented to us. So lack of trained dementia specialists. So I'm going to show you a case vignette illustrating the same. So this is a person who had 16 years of education, living with spouse in the village. The son was a pediatrician in Bangalore. And from 2009, the person had problems, forgetfulness, difficulty with instructions, frequent low mood, anxiety, lost his way. Then he was seen by a neurologist, diagnosed as depression, referred to the psychiatrist. I don't know why the psychiatrist diagnosed him as bipolar disorder, put him on valproate. So in 2019, he was seen at our clinic. He had moderate impairment. ACE was 45. There was diffuse atrophy, especially biparietal. So diagnosis of young onset Alzheimer's disease was made 10 years after onset of symptoms. So here is somebody who actually sought help, but they were not diagnosed. So we see both kinds of problems where either the family is not aware, or the family approach the clinician for help, but the clinician is not able to make a diagnosis. So what is the way forward? So obviously we need to do all this. We need to improve awareness. We need to have policies. We should have a national dementia plan. We have been discussing this with the policymakers and the government. We have had several meetings, but it's still not emerged. Scaling clinical capacity is very important. We need to train clinicians, but we also need to have other tiered workers. Like we don't have any liaison people between the family and the clinician. We don't have community workers, social workers, so we need more of those to even talk to them. We need care support, which is very lacking. Caregiving services are very lacking in India. ARDSI and Dementia India Alliance do something, but it's not enough for a huge population like ours. We need biomarker scaling and diversity testing. We need to establish cutoffs. We need to test different kinds of people with comorbidities across India to see how these biomarkers function in our setting. We need to promote brain health. I think that's very important. Funding and collaborations are also important. Thank you very much for your attention. So before the questions, thank you very much. Thanks for all the attention and that you stayed for this before lunch. So I also wanted to make a point about that ADHD. So I think that all of us are stuck with the whole week we are hypoactive, but on the weekend we are hyperactive. So we are like rats emerging out of the tunnel. All of us want to go somewhere. We'll block all the roads. Go to this place. I think we hate our place. I don't know, where you're living, everybody is out on the weekend. So I think that we should read. It's not just about doing all this, I think mindfulness. We should read Pico Iyer's book, The Art of Stillness, and the adventure of going nowhere. So either we fall asleep or you're on the mobile. I think the art of contemplation and stillness is the most important thing for brain health, not anything else we have heard. I think that is very important. That's also very important for creativity. No creativity can emerge out of chaos. That's what I think. Thank you.
Thanks once again, Dr. Ratnavali, but we'll hold you for 10 more minutes if it's okay with everyone. This has been a historic day because we started on time and we are finishing on time. So let's give it, a round of applause to everyone here. You all were very patient with us. Thanks to all the clinicians so far. But yes, Dr. Sanjay, yes, please go ahead.
Ma'am, thank you for doing the pioneering work that you're doing and setting the standards for all of us to learn from. Dr. Anu presented something which was very useful, is the management of diabetes in the elderly. Something that you spoke about which really caught my attention, because blood pressure management is something which is critical. And you mentioned that especially in the elderly, and I'm going by what cardiologists say, 100 plus your age is okay, for your systolic blood pressure. And so if you're, say, 60 years old, 160 is okay for systolic, but actually it's not, it's going to infect. Now, how do you change this approach where your physicians, cardiologists and physicians are looking at...
Different clinicians, sorry.
Ma'am, the point is, the outcome is what is important for all of us. Now, how do we ensure that, people understand that if blood pressure needs to be 120 or not more than 130 systolic, no matter your age, how do cardiologists and physicians also adopt the same standards,
So it's there in there. Obviously, the American Heart Society has given the recommendation. They know it. Whether they implement or not, it is difficult. So I think that when we are in the age of AI, maybe instead of doing Google search for things which are not relevant, maybe general public should also research things like diabetes and blood pressure and monitor them as well as control them and ask the right questions to the doctor.
I think a great way to learn would be how in Manipal perhaps you are spreading that awareness among different specialities to follow what blood pressure to monitor.
So I think it's easier to educate the general public than your own clinicians, which is more challenging.
Well, I think that's another part which we should look at, because if simple thing like keeping your blood pressure levels adequately controlled is going to impact the outcome of dementia or cognitive decline.
I agree. There are some caveats,
maybe a study like that.
There are some caveats if they have significant carotid disease, or if they are prone to syncope, or if they have 80 plus years. So we won't be so strict. 140 should be good enough. So obviously you have to take into consideration the age any other comorbidities and whether they have any carotid disease. But on the whole, the blood pressure should be reduced because there's a lot of asymptomatic brain pathology which happens, subcortical ischemic vascular disease. So I think it's very important.
Sorry, I'll just pitch in. It's
Yeah,
kind of,
sure.
Yeah, no two clinicians would agree on this. No two lawyers would agree on certain things. But what we've seen is, at least in the elderly, when the pressures go down, the cerebral circulation gets compromised. So we usually say 140/90 is still something which in the elderly we would stick to. 120/80, I mean, these are arbitrary numbers. What we'll have to look at, what we did as a part of the diabetes in the elderly in India guidelines. So again, the dictum is individualization. So if somebody has, say, an EF of 25%, there's no way I can bring up the blood pressure to 140/90. So 120/80 would still be kind of the cutoff. But if someone's EF is around 55%, and then we know that there is an early cognitive dysfunction, I would still want it to be around 140/90 so that the cerebral circulation is maintained. So I think bottom line is extremely individualistic. No one kind of cutoff fits everybody. So we'll have to take it on a case-to-case basis.
Yeah, important, thank you, Anup.
Yes,
but there are lots of people between the
please
40 and 60 years who are walking around with uncontrolled blood pressure. So I would still like to emphasize that point again. So we're not talking about actually 80 plus who can have syncope. We obviously have to be more liberal, just like we do with diabetes, where we avoid hypoglycemia and, like you mentioned, not take into account only HbA1c.
Hi, morning. My name is Dharmendra Rai. I train corporates on a tool called mind mapping, which is about cognitive psychology. And just two questions about the bilingual part. You mentioned the reasons why a bilingual person has lesser problems than a person who knows a single language. And you mentioned the reasons that he's using his executive function to suppress the other language. Is that your intuition or is that research?
It's research.
It's research, okay. And second question is, has it also been proved that a person who knows 3 languages is substantially better than the person who knows 2 languages?
Yeah, so they have tried to, but it's inconclusive, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Because you don't get enough population to study those phenomena, like multiple, people who have multiple languages and all.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for that wonderful lecture and the pioneering work that you do. I have 2 questions, one a little technical and one a commonly asked question. So we are all excited about plasma blood markers, P217 especially. The ROC
So they're available, sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
They're available in India currently.
Agape is also a vendor who is planning to do that. So my question to you, ma'am, is the validation data that you showed on the slide, the ROC curves, they are mapped onto the amyloid PET scans as gold standard, whether they are amyloid positive or not. So because in India we do not have amyloid PET scans, and even the CSF amyloid beta 40/40 ratio, they were also mapped onto the amyloid PET scans. So how do you foresee validation happening in the Indian setting?
Yeah, so that's a difficult question. So that has been, people are doing those tests in national institutes like NIMHANS, AIMS, but I think they have a different way of doing the test. These are all chemiluminescence assays, but I think they have SIMOA or something else.
Yes.
So I'm not sure those questions cannot be answered at this point.
Yes.
So it's very important that if you order the test and it comes borderline, so you need to be aware of those. That's the reason I said that there are some things which we need open to interpretation.
Agreed, ma'am. And the second most commonly asked questions in the families that I deal with for late onset Alzheimer's disease, the family members, the children ask about ApoE testing or genetic testing for them. So I tend to say no need to do those tests, but what would be your opinion on answering those kind of questions?
I would agree. ApoE4 is just a risk factor, and that's only for in the late onset Alzheimer's disease. So I don't think we should recommend, unless there's a strong family history for early onset Alzheimer's disease, where you should do genetics, but not for late onset. But if you're considering anti-amyloid therapy, ApoE testing is mandatory, because people who are E4 homozygous have higher chances of side effects.
So You showed that excellent slide by Alberto Espe about the two sides of the amyloid cascade hypothesis. So do you agree with the possibility of lecanemab and donanemab being really...
So I think that this is just the beginning. All of them emphasize that this is just the beginning in the era of anti-amyloid therapies. Just like for MS or for oncology, neuro-oncology, you know, the immune check inhibitors or the immunomodulators, there is so much difference, isn't it? The way we are treating cancer now compared to, say, 20 years back. So we will have to wait and be more patient. So here we have to select patients very carefully if you want, but this is not for everyone. Obviously the cost itself is so prohibitive. And then we also have to take into account the infusion reactions. And we also know the hardcore truth that if you get an infusion done in a private hospital, it costs you 50,000 to 1 lakh just for that whole infusion, one day. So you have to add that to the cost of that. Then you also have to get MRIs done, serial MRIs done. So it's going to be very, very expensive. So unless somebody is very keen, we have a patient who is now has a young onset Alzheimer's disease. The husband is very keen. So we've got everything done. So they have to procure the drug. 2 months later, probably in India, both will be available. So,
how young?
Young, that patient is 52. So we're considering giving the treatment to that patient. But so we also recommend that actually that we are not talking about this now, but that we should have an evaluation committee. That's how they do it. Every case is evaluated and we decide whether to give treatment. Here I consulted my US colleagues whether we can give treatment. Yeah, in all places where they decide whether the patient is eligible to take anti-amyloid therapy.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Mansi Deshmukh. I've been working in the healthcare IT space for almost 10 years now. The most significant question that comes to my mind is, like ma'am said, that they are in the process of talking to the government for policy making and trying to get it streamlined. But how about the people, like the marginalized population who don't even have access to the information about dementia? And how do we reach out to that? And if, let's say, I come from a village, so if I get together a group of neurologists, psychologists, and a team that is working on dementia, get a screening done, how do you get that data analyzed? And how do we reach that data to your team?
So we are not the one point solution for this problem, but there are many memory clinics which are operating in India. There are many dementia specialists, both neurologists, psychiatrists, and geriatricians who are looking after patients. And I also know that the government is doing more in rural healthcare in terms of even dementia detection. They have they have different programs. The names escape me, but they have different programs. They have trained community health workers to promote brain health as well as to be aware about simple symptoms of dementia and get them for evaluation. So definitely it is happening. So it's not that it is not happening, but we still don't have a national dementia plan.
Right, yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Excuse me. There's someone asking
It's
a
okay.
question.
Sorry, my fault.
I'm Dr. Vikram Khanna. Excellent presentation. You know how a scientific presentation should be, and many inputs to how to improve myself also. My question is, we have discussed about blood pressure, especially uncontrolled, diabetes. Has there been a similar observation with regards to hyperlipidemia, especially triglyceride levels?
So I'm not aware of hypertriglyceridemia. Mainly talk about LDL, and they also talk about high HDL. So low HDL can be a risk factor, but high HDL can also be a risk. Very high HDL can also be a risk factor for dementia. So, but triglycerides by themselves, I'm not aware. Maybe there is some literature, but I'm not aware.
Just a comment. It was very engaging.
Thank you.
Yeah. I had a great time since morning. I just wanted to say there are a lot of Ds that I've heard since morning and have a lot of relevance. of Ds that I've heard since morning, and they have a lot of relevance. So diabetes, dementia, depression, disparity, discrimination, dysglycemia, dyslipidemia, dopamine, and finally, like you mentioned, the oral molecule, donepezil. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for maybe one last question. Yes, I know you've been raising your hand.
Okay, I've summed this up the entire session from the start till the end. In 1 minute, less than a minute, half a minute.
Okay, let's end on that note.
Yeah, okay. This is Dr. Francesca Arana summing up in poetic verse today's summation of India's first brain health and early detention forum for Cogniverse. It began with a welcome note by Isaac John, with humor and insight of Rahul and his journey long. Dr. Sumiti Saran's talk on screening and monitoring brain health opened up opportunity to monitor and intervene with detecting early changes help. We got clarity on present and future cognitive monitoring theses and witnessed a better version of cognitive game for brain health analysis. The expert session through dialogue in prevention of risk factors covered A to Z of all cognitive and ADL aspects and tractors. Dr. Sanjay Arora, your wisdom and experience is really appealing. You are indeed an epitome of healthy aging. From your chat, all of us, the takeaway pill is to do a test, not to fall ill. We will take home the seed you have today planted. It's not to take our brain for granted. Next was a panel discussion on mental health in the age of AI. Here, from Dr. Prakhar Jain and Siddharth Warrior, we had a lot to gain, so a big high five. Use It Before You Lose It by Dr. Jwala began with a brain game activity that caught all our attention, covered aspects of multimodal inventions for brain illness prevention. Dr. Anoop spoke on brain health, aging, and longevity, covered 3 aspects of diagnosis, biomarkers, treatment, devices, and 100 a sure probability. Dr. Ratnavali helped us understand the global science and local reality, covered breakthroughs, blood biomarkers, indications, treatments, and way forward to detailed study. In today's session, all of us learned from the very best, and it was also great meeting all the rest. Really, it was indeed a half day well spent. Thanks a ton, Ivory, for inviting us for this event.
We also couldn't have said it better with a lot of, like Dr. Ratnavali, thank you once again for everything that you shared with us today, and especially to our outstation clinicians for having made the trip. I mean, you can see that, you know, the discussions, the engaging, this could have gone on. But we'll pause now. On a final note, I think when we began the morning, I think we were all curious, what will we learn? We came as people who are very, very keen to learn. I want all of us to go back as advocates, okay? Like that is the only message I want to leave with you. And we have made sure, Dr. Ratnavali, that there are no soft drinks. So, and now we can all head to lunch. Thank you once again. Thank you once again, everyone.